For joining us, those who are watching us on the Charlotte City channel or streaming this on Facebook Live. Thank you for joining us for the February 27th council meeting. I will call this meeting to order and say welcome to everyone. We have a considerable agenda both during the action review as well as the council meeting, and we will have a closed session at the end of the council meeting tonight. So just buckle up and get ready, all right? So before we do this, we're going to go through and have the staff address the issues that were sent at your table or at your places. There is another referral, I think last week at the council report outs, there was a question about attendance review for policies and boards and commissions, and that has now been referred to the Budget, Governance, and Intergovernmental Committee. And so that referral is at your table place. In addition, Ms. Harris often works with you throughout the day to get ready for the agenda tonight. And so we will have Q&A from Ms. Harris. It's at your place, and I'm going to ask her to review the questions and comments.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor and Council. And again, yes, you have it in front of you so far. The questions have been answered so far, but I would like to ask at this time while you're looking over it if you have any additional questions, and also to note that many of the questions today were on policy or business items, so you'll have a chance to vote on those separately in the chambers as well. And there was one, I believe I followed up with Mayor Pro Tem on consent about the Metrolina Regional Household Travel Survey, and I believe that addressed your question. Thank you. And then also, just as I believe the clerk and the mayor will note, there was one item pulled from consent, item 43. But does anybody have any consent questions at this time?
Any additional questions? Hearing none.
Ms. Mayfield.
Ms. Mayfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So 43 was pulled, but not 42 from consent.
Correct, just 43 was, unless, please double check clerk, and is that the number, 43? Yes, thank
Just
you.
wanted to verify. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. So, yes, Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is not regarding consent. It's about the manager's report. I sent a question. Will that be addressed in the report?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
All right. So what I'd like to do is the staff has deferred item 43 of our consent agenda. Is there anyone that has an item that they would like to have a separate vote? Okay, no separate votes. Are there any items for comment? All right, with that?
Number 40.
Item 42 for a comment. All right, thank you. So may I have a motion for agenda items 26 through 48 with the exception of item 43?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion, I want to recognize Ms. Mayfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item 42 is an MREM. Unfortunately, this is a property that has had a lot of challenges in the neighborhood. I'm working with the manager's office and would like for the attorney's office to look at some other ways that we may be able to potentially address nuisance homes. What I'm concerned about is if we look back and do a snapshot, we may have some homes that we have demolished, and our current model is we have a lien, so first right of refusal. When that property is sold, then we get paid back that. But have we opened up the door where investors or others, the replacement property on that land that we cleared, are we tracking to see if there's a possibility that that may have opened the door for some of the new development and displacement that we're seeing in some communities? Because it seems like a lot of our NREMs are in certain areas of town, and those areas of town have seen a lot of new growth. Hence, a community that may had homes that were under one price point that are now looking at considerably higher price points. I would like to get for us to, and Mr. Manager, this would really be a request for you and your team to present to council a snapshot of what has been the impact of the NREMs that we have approved, and looking at what new development has come there. And for our city attorney's office, what language can we put in place when we're having these discussions to try to help stabilize neighborhoods if we, through local government policy, are creating some of the transition that we're then later trying to offset by adding additional funds towards it. Thank you.
Any further comment or discussion?
Move to approve.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next action review, I'll turn it over to the manager.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. As you mentioned earlier, Mayor, we have a robust agenda, and I will tell you that there's a space on the manager's report if we have to move any of these into later in the day. But what we do have is some updates that the council have asked for over the last 6 months or so. We have a Safe Charlotte update, specifically the alternatives to violence, and Federico Rios will give you an update with a little bit of data dealing with the first full year of implementation with the new team. Then we have a CATS review. I believe that was Mr. Graham had asked if we could have a review that's specific to the Management Partners Report. I believe that went out mid-December. So we will have Liz Babson and Brent Cagle provide an update there. And then you'll have a couple of items in the well, let's back up. In the month of April, you'll have a public hearing as well as an opportunity to approve your first social district. So we would just wanted Debbie Smith to provide a little bit of feedback about where we are in this two-step process. And as you mentioned earlier, Mayor, we have 2 closed session items. So that's what we have, and unless there's questions, I can turn this over to Federico.
Any questions for the manager before Federico begins? I don't see any. Federico, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Good afternoon to you, members of council, manager, and staff. I am grateful for the opportunity to give a quick update regarding the first year of implementation of the Alternatives to Violence program. So the first few slides are really a recap. This is information you've seen before. This is the framework to address violence that you all approved, going on 2 years now. And we're really going to hone in on that center pillar, the violence interruption piece, recognizing that all the other pillars are definitely a facet of this particular program, but we wanted to call out where we'll spend our time today. So to review, the cities and counties, so I want to take a moment to acknowledge Tracy Campbell with Mecklenburg County, our partner at the Office of Violence Prevention. She and I have helped coordinate and program lead this initiative. It is a partnership between the city and county. We are implementing the Cure Violence model for violence interruption. The partnership lines up not only with the framework that you saw, but also the way forward, the county's report on community violence prevention and the strategies therein. You will remember that both the city and county put up $250,000 each for the first year of implementation of this model, which we focused on the Betty's Ford Road corridor. So again, a quick recap. We began working with Cure Violence Global to provide the technical assistance that would be needed for their model. And just to ensure that everyone understands what goes into technical assistance, they provide ongoing training for staff. They provide support for the individuals that program manage, myself and Tracy. They provide the database that all of the documentation regarding this intervention is implemented into. They provide technical support relating to that, also coaching of staff, specifically the site director on site for the program. Additionally, I want to kind of focus here that you will remember that though you all, City Council and County Commission, funded the first year of implementation, years 2 and 3 were covered by a grant provided by Wells Fargo and the Green Light Fund to the tune of $1.2 million. That keeps our program going and enables us to continue providing excellent service to the individuals in that corridor. You'll see that in April 2022, we extended YAP for an additional year in an effort to collect some of the data that you'll see today. And you'll remember that we had to push back the date for a year based on some dynamics that occurred regarding the team transition. And so glad to say that that team is stable and the data we are providing is 1 full year of service of that team. I'll also point out that thank Congresswoman Alma Adams for providing a congressional appropriation for 2 years that will allow us to expand the initiative into the West Boulevard Remont Road area and the Nations Ford East Arrowwood area. Now, I'm offering you site maps for each one of these areas on this slide. I really want you to hone in on the site map to the left, the leftmost map, that is the Betty's Ford Road area. And just to give you an overview on what you're looking at, violent crime densities for the period 2017 to 2021 are captured on this map. The graduated symbols for violent crime locations are for the 1st of January 2022 to November 30th, 2022, and that has to do with when we pulled this data. The densities and the graduated symbols are based on the number of violent crime victims at the location, and to be clear, violent crime is defined as murder, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. These maps are provided by our partners at Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, and this data really plays an integral role not only in how we've selected the locations that we are currently in and are expanding to, but also how we measure impact over time. This gives you a snapshot on the work that has been occurring in the Betty's Ford Road corridor with the Alternatives to Violence team, again, through the host organization Youth Advocate Programs. This is really impressive, right? There's a great deal of time that has been spent implementing the Cure Violence approach. I want to target a couple of places here. One, the behavior change services. We're working with the most at-risk individuals in the corridor oftentimes, and those individuals we find have a number of issues that get them into making bad decisions, which lead to violent incidents. And so there's a ton of time being spent connecting to the most appropriate resource given on the specific need of the individual being served. Our teams, again, are made up of site directors, outreach workers, and violence interrupters. The outreach worker is their nomenclature for a case manager, the person connecting to appropriate resources, and the violence interrupter is the person on the ground getting in front of and mediating conflicts before they arise. I'd also like to point out that 65 goals, participant goals, have been successfully achieved. By and large, the most of those goals are related back to personal education. I think it's important to call that out. That is where our outreach workers are spending their time connecting to appropriate resources for these individuals. You'll remember the last time I came to present that we were beginning a 3-year evaluation with our partners at UNCC's Urban Core. Again, some of the dollars that were allotted through the Greenlight Fund and Wells Fargo have allowed us to do this 3-year evaluation. The purpose of the evaluation is twofold. It's to assess the effects of the program and to learn more about how the program is being implemented. We want to ensure that we are doing this model with fidelity. This allows stakeholders to determine the value or impact of this type of programming in the service area and helps us improve future programming when needed. The research team has conducted a process evaluation after this first year. You see some of the things they're looking at. And again, an outcome evaluation will be provided after this year and after the 3rd year of implementation. We're excited to share that within the next few weeks, the full report will be provided by our partners at UNCC Charlotte regarding this information. With that said, I do have a couple of points to share regarding what you will eventually see in that report. So again, we're looking at process, outcomes, and methodology. In the process, we're looking to see how the program has been implemented, and where have there been issues? Where have there been challenges regarding to implementation? How do we get around those issues? Again, with outcomes, has it been effective at preventing that violence on a community level? And is it working to address the knowledge, skills, and behaviors that individual participants need? We're looking at qualitative and quantitative data. What our findings have found are that the program's strengths have been our community partnerships. These have been really, really key. So I'll again share with you all that the members of this team are individuals that have deep connections to the Betty's Ford Road corridor. These are individuals that have lived or do live in that corridor and have relationships based on where they have stayed and how deeply they are a part of this community. They have worked with local business owners. They have worked with residents. They have worked with community organizations to continually provide high level of service, understand the dynamics that are occurring on the ground. They provide monthly events. Now, for a lot of people, you look at an event and you're wondering, well, what's the purpose of that? The purpose of the event is to continue that correlation to, we're not going to allow this behavior to continue in this corridor. We want to make sure that we're front-facing. We want to make sure that we're connecting with the individuals in the area and best understanding what's occurring, right? Additionally, again, I've spoken to their staff credibility. They are incredibly resourceful individuals. These are persons that have been equipped, both by myself and our partners in Mecklenburg County, with a whole gamut of resources in addition to the ones they brought to the work. Where we need to improve, being very transparent, we have individuals that this is really their first time inputting documentation and doing data entry. And for anyone that's done that type of work, especially at the high level that we're asking of this program, it takes time to get accustomed. And so we will continue to improve the data entry that is being provided. We will continue to build community trust. It takes a long time, right? It takes time spent and effort to develop deep community trust and ensure that the information that's being shared isn't getting passed through to anyone else. And again, we will continue to improve how we identify those individuals highest at risk. In fact, those two bullets go hand in hand, right? We're trying to build community trust with individuals that oftentimes are involved in instances or circumstances that would make them invariably not trust and not share. And so, again, this goes back to that staff credibility, that resourcefulness, being able to provide for the needs that are being expressed. So, within the evaluation process, our partners at UNCC first identified neighborhoods that had similar demographics to Betty's Ford Road. This is important because we want to see that this work, that in fact the work that is occurring is being compared to an area that is similar. Again, they looked at crime data in similar neighborhoods before and after ATV's implementation. There were a number of variables that were being evaluated, including aggravated assault with and without a gun, non-fatal gunshot injuries, homicides with a firearm, and violent crimes. Very excited to share. Again, well, let me give a caveat here. I'm being very transparent in saying that our partners at Cure Violence Global thought I was crazy for collecting year one of data. They ask typically that cities wait for a second year to really evaluate what's occurring and give time to build the trust that we just shared continues to be something we want to have with residents in the corridor. We went ahead recognizing the need, recognizing the timetable, recognizing the expertise of our partner UNCC. And I'm proud to share that Betty's Ford Road, the site, has had a statistically significant lower rate of homicides committed with a firearm compared to similar neighborhoods. So again, neighborhoods with similar demographics. That is huge for a site that is only 1 year into this work. I also want to share, being honest, that there is no other statistical significance for the types of crime we've shared, so there's still work to do. We have in no ways reached a goalpost or a milestone that is enough. There's a ton more to do related to this work. And we have heard positively from individuals that are being served by the program that they are acquiring the skills and the knowledge that helps prevent them from ending up in violent incidents of violence. The significant finding related to homicide with a firearm, I want to make sure to share this, may be attributed to subsequent interventions, right? There has been an increased police presence since the incident that occurred, the Juneteenth shooting that occurred in 2020. What we can say is that the ATV team has gone out whenever there has been a shooting in the Betty's Ford Road corridor and been able to work with individuals to prevent a subsequent retaliation shooting. This is key. We know we're not going to solve it all, but we have a particular incident. I'll share that we're in the midst of the RFP that we've launched on February 8th. The RFP actually closes this Friday. We are looking for site providers for all 3 sites. We've opened it up, recognizing we in no ways want to get stagnant with the providers that are currently providing the service. We want to open this up to as many community organizations as possible. Evaluation and site selection will occur by March 30th. There's a panel of stakeholders that includes community association members and partner organizations, the Greenlight Fund, Wells Fargo, which I referenced earlier, Mecklenburg County, who's here in the room, and Cure Violence Global will all be on that panel. Once those organizations are selected, they will go through a comprehensive training. First, they will hire their staff, then they will train their staff in the model and ensure that they have access to the database, documentation expectations, case management training, et cetera, and be able to get on the ground working as of August of this year. This is a continuity. We are looking forward to working with the organizations that will be selected. With that, I'll open it up to the manager and any questions we may have.
Mayor, for any questions, I would like to, first of all, thank you, Fed. And Fed, if you can go back to, I guess, slide 2, just to remind the mayor and council that this is collaborative. If the county were in the room, they would have the same framework. We're working together with it, and we're just focusing on one piece tonight, which is the violence interrupter piece. I think it's a good pairing because I guess last Thursday we talked about public safety in general, and I know that we've had some questions from Councilmember Mitchell about just public safety. So I would say that kudos to the working relationship between the city and the county on this. It may have been a while, but remember, there is the Safe Charlotte framework that we have also that builds upon some of the things that even the Mayor Pro Tem mentioned this week, and that is what can we do in terms of having sometimes non-sworn responses to certain situations. So just trying to make sure that even though we're talking about one thing tonight, this is connected to the corridors, it's connected to the county, and this is just one element of how to address what's happening in terms of safety in our community.
All right, I'm going to open it up for questions. Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Regal, thank you for providing us with this update. Could you go to slide 5, please? I just want to get a little clarification. So we're looking at the focus areas and looking at 2017 to 21 versus January 22 to November 22. What is the breakout that we're looking at?
So when you see the big red circles or the red circles, those are the January 1st to November 30th of 2022. Those are the incidents that occurred that year. Where you see the kind of tannish to pinkish, that's where incidents have occurred over time in the 5-year span that preceded that year.
So we're seeing an increase.
You're not
activity.
necessarily seeing an increase, you're seeing where historically, so I wish I could, the teacher in me wants to run up to the, so.
Go ahead.
Seeing here
Yes.
is where crime has occurred, where these incidents have occurred over time. When you see a lighter shade, what you're actually seeing is that area is getting less hot, right? But then you see that we're bubbling up in maybe some areas that are in that space, new areas, right? So it gives you kind of a historic and a current outlook on crime patterns.
So it's from these patterns that you have identified the areas that you're looking to expand to when we go to slide number 11, as far
Yes,
as next steps.
Yes, this data has definitely informed the decisions we made on the areas we wanted to be in. Again, part of the dynamic has been the intense clustering you'll see in these maps. So there's a recognition that this is occurring constantly, and it's occurring in particular concentrated areas. The Cure Violence Global Model, in that it works with community members, it is relational in nature. So the Cure Violence Global Model is not intended to be in every area. In fact, there's some areas that it would not be well suited for. I'll mention specifically 85 and Sugar Creek because that's come up often. The type of crime that is occurring on 85 and Sugar Creek is not relational in nature, it is transactional. And so it would not be a good fit there. You have communities, residential areas that are being deeply impacted in these clusters. And so we recognize that that is a correlative that helps us to determine that Cure Violence Global would be a good fit for these areas.
And the final question I have for you, with looking at identifying these areas, have we tracked that the zip codes with the increase of what seems to be relational interaction that's happening at our North Lake area? Are we tracking if those individuals are actually from these 3 zip codes?
It's a great question. It's one of the challenges we face with the data, that oftentimes the address that we get doesn't necessarily correlate to where the individual is at the moment. And so it continues to be a challenge. What I will say, and this is not in any way, this is anecdotal, right? So this isn't data. What we have heard consistently from residents is that a good deal of the incidents we see happening throughout the city are emanating from specific spaces. Weston Remount has bubbled up as one of the areas that incidents that occur there oftentimes end up leading to a retaliation in another place in the city.
So I think it will be helpful while we're tracking the data to see if we can add that as part of a data point, is starting to track these zip codes, if not narrow it all the way down to neighborhoods, for when we have these incidences, to see if they are, because we've heard it in the community for years, that something that started in the neighborhood has ended across in another part of town. But if we have this opportunity and if this is going well, it may be helpful to also add that as a data point to see how we can change some of those conversations. Thank you.
My question is regarding the RFP.
Yes, ma'am.
So the RFP that was issued, that's for the expansion of the program and also the Beatty's Ford area, right?
Correct. It's for all 3 sites.
Okay. So are we, one of the issues that I really advocated for initially was for community organizations to be considered.
Yes.
Are we hoping to be able to support community organizations for maybe for the expansion? I understand for consistency, you know, we might consider the current vendor, but for the expansion, are we going to perhaps give special, I don't want to say special attention to that, but I know one of the reasons that the YES, is it YES was chosen?
YAP.
YAP was chosen, was because they had the ability to track and report. And we see now that maybe that's not a realistic goal, I don't know, for the first year of reporting. So if that's something that we're looking at maybe changing and not requiring that level of reporting, are we going to be able to consider community organizations? Did we learn anything from the initial RFP and initial contract that we could be able to support local organizations who are in the community?
So I have a number of answers to that, and I apologize if I start rambling. First piece, in relation to the program itself, I will stand on the fact that we selected an organization that had a track record of doing this type of programming and was able to implement it quickly, though there were challenges throughout, right? I think that was necessary, and that frees us up to be able to better assist a new nascent organization that this may be adjacent to their work, but not something that they have done in the past. I'll add to that we have been incredibly intentional about reaching out to grassroots and community-based organizations with this opportunity. As of Friday, we've had 8 letters of intent provided, and by and large, those have been provided by community-based, small grassroots organizations. I think we're in a place where we understand the implementation enough locally that we will be able to support organizations. I will say one of the things that I have advised all the organizations we've shared this with through social media, through personal contact, through advisement on a number of one-on-ones with organizations, is that because this is Department of Justice dollars, if they are a small organization, they should pair with an organization that has a track record of being able to manage federal dollars. It's absolutely necessary to make good on the use of this money. We do not want to end up with back office issues that eliminate the opportunity to provide this type of service. And so we have been intentional about reaching out to those groups, about pairing them with individual or other organizations that have the ability to manage those funds and assist with some of the things that maybe they don't have the experience in doing. I'm excited that we're going to have so many organizations applied. We already have significantly more than applied in the first round. And we've been really intentional about getting the message out there and sharing this opportunity with organizations.
Thank you.
Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just want to thank you for the work you've done over the past year on the Beatty's Ford Road corridor. I had the opportunity to coordinate and work with the men and women that are doing the job on the street. So I want to thank them for the hard work. Slow progress, for sure, but progress nevertheless. Would love to invite you to one of the neighborhood association meetings along the corridor where all the neighborhoods are gathered to kind of hear this presentation and actually also meet the team. They've been asking a lot about that.
Count me in.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any further comment? Hearing none, thank you very much, Federico. We really appreciate the work that's being done. Okay,
Mr. Jones, what's up next?
So thank you, Mayor and members of council. So next we have up a presentation that's dealing with where we are with cats, but more importantly, to talk about the management partners report that I believe was delivered to you and to the community back in mid-December. So Liz is going to give a brief overview of what the report asked for, how CATS was reviewed, and then Brent will talk a bit about what he's been doing since he's left my office temporarily to manage CATS as the interim CEO. So just as a little bit of a history, you are well aware how COVID-19 impacted both CATS operations, but transit operations across the country. We had to modify our operations. Ridership was down, vacancies were up, and there were a number of missed trips that really got your attention and their attention, and we tried to address that. So the summer of 2022 is when we asked management partners to come in and do a review, and Liz will talk a bit about what that review covered. And as I mentioned before, the report was issued in December. But since December, Brent has stepped in, and he immediately started to understand the CATS organization and from top to bottom, and looked at different areas where we could have improvement. I believe his first few weeks he had a number of town halls, but because of the numerous shifts, I think some of his town halls started in the wee hours of the morning. So thank you, Brent, for that. I will tell you that with Brent having the expertise at the airport, the sixth busiest airport in the world, we thought that, well, we were very gracious when Brent approached me about being able to step in. So I will tell you that there's a lot of work to be done, but we wanted to be able to give you an update today about where we are. So with that said, I'll turn it over to you, Liz.
All right.
Yes.
Oh, that's fifth,
What's that?
that's fifth, not sixth.
Busiest?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, a lot happened since I got these notes this weekend. All right, thank you.
Thank you. So good evening, Mayor and Council. Again, my name is Liz Babson. I'm an Assistant City Manager and joined tonight by Brent Cagle, who is our interim CATS CEO. And so, as Mr. Jones indicated, I'll provide an overview of the Management Partners Review, and then I'm going to turn it over to Brent, who will talk really about his first 90 days, what he's seen, and some of the implementation steps we're already taking to make improvements. So again, the assessment by Management Partners began with a memo to Mayor and Council on July 16th of last year. The city manager sent that memo to you all acknowledging the operational challenges that we were seeing in CATS at that time, and it was really post-COVID, resulting from staffing shortages and vacancies, employee morale, safety concerns for bus drivers, and all of these, again, were impacting our ability to provide reliability and service to the community. So the memo made a commitment to take steps that were short-term improvements and also identify some longer-term needs. So the manager committed to immediately evaluating current practices, looking for opportunities to ensure a safe and sustainable work environment for CATS employees, and Brent will talk about some of those improvements in his update in just a moment. Last year, in addition to some of those improvements, City Council adopted a fairly aggressive compensation plan that was designed to increase retention and recruitment, and we're starting to see some of those vacancy trends shift over this last fiscal year as a result of that. And finally, what I'm up here tonight to give you an update on is that we engaged management partners to conduct an organizational review and assessment of CATS that would be used to assess those longer-term needs for the department. So the review assesses the following areas: organizational structure and CATS leadership, procurement contract oversight, employee morale, contract relationship with RAPDev, who is our bus service provider, service provision and bus reliability issues. And so, Council, you received the assessment, which documented management partners' process and priority areas of focus in December of last year. And that assessment really provided a high-level roadmap with priority areas of focus and identified areas for improvement. and it is intended to serve as our long-term action plan to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the CATS management. So a little bit about that review process. It involved several ways of gathering information from various sources. Management partners conducted interviews with city employees and RapDev management, and some of those departments included CATS, the city manager's office, internal audit, procurement, sustainability, and again, also conversations with the RapDev management staff. They reviewed documents, including budgets, audit and performance reviews, strategic plans, and other customer satisfaction surveys that had been completed in recent years. They additionally conducted a survey of City of Charlotte CATS employees and conducted a limited review of other transit systems like Austin, Savannah, Indianapolis, Long Beach, and Memphis, to name a few. And so the result of all of that month's worth of work and receiving information was a conclusion that was a management roadmap with objectives. These objectives are basically recommendations that will serve as an assessment and identify themes and issues or areas in need of improvement. So those comprehensive recommendations are a collaborative team with shared mission and value, organizational culture that encourages transparency and staff retention, clear expectations and accountability within the department, clarified roles and responsibilities related to contracted services, and a governance structure that's accountable and transparent to the community that it serves. And so again, as the manager stated in December, we have shared the management partners review with you, and we've been continuously working to address these issues in an effort to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of CATS as we serve this community. I'll turn it over to Brent Cagle, and you'll hear more about some of the work that's underway.
Okay. Thank you, Liz. Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. Again, I am Brent Cagle. I'm the interim CATS CEO. Interim CEO. That bears repeating. So the interim CEO. Okay, so first 90 days. I am, I think my communications manager told me today, I am about 103 days in, to be exact. So over the first 90 days, starting in December 1st, I wanted to provide you with some of the observations, some of the things that I've learned as I've spent time in CATS and really tried to dig in and understand the organization and the culture. As Mr. Jones said, having spent time at the airport, I will say there are many parallels between CATS and aviation, and really CATS in any large operating department, right? Any large department that operates 24/7 a day, serves the community. They have a lot of the same priorities, and managing those departments can be very similar in many ways. So, early successes. I always want to start with what I have been impressed by in the last 90 days. Number one, I was, as Mr. Jones said, my first 2 weeks with CATS was really spending time talking to the employees. So I went out what we called town hall meetings across all shifts throughout all the work groups. One thing I'll say, CATS is challenging with communication. There are roughly 600 City of Charlotte CATS employees, and they're literally spread across many locations. And they work first, second, third shift 7 days a week. So the first 2 weeks was really about getting out and meeting the staff. And I was really impressed. We have a lot of staff, most of our staff, the majority, who are proud to work for CATS. They love their job. They love working for CATS. So I spent time talking to them and understanding that they have a strong sense of pride serving the community. They understand the importance of their work, and they're proud of that. And they're committed to helping CATS continue to be a good organization and to seeing CATS evolve into a great organization. The other good news, CATS has stabilized, and I'll say stabilized, our bus and rail operations. I think you may recall back last summer of 2022, we were seeing, when it comes to bus, we were seeing missed trips daily or monthly in the 8 to 9% range. As of January, our missed trips was less than 1%. It was actually 0.01% in January. Now, we do have some concerns about maintaining that when I talk about vacancies, but that is a huge improvement. We've rationalized the service, and now we're providing a service that we can maintain reliable, consistent service in. And I think that's the foundation, right? For people to have confidence in our service, they need to have confidence that when we say that bus, when we say that train is going to be there, it's there. We also have, rail operations. They remain consistent, 20-minute headways with 15-minute peak hours during the week. So what that really means is 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, we shift over to peak time hours and 15-minute headways to accommodate the additional passengers. Again, we've stabilized the operation. We also have a collective bargaining agreement. We, being RATP Dev, was able to successfully negotiate and work with the union, Smart Union, to enter into a collective bargaining agreement that enhances pay and benefits, and we were able to avoid a bus operator strike. The bus operations contract with RATP Dev is in its last year, and we have been working diligently to modernize the RFP, the request for proposal, so that we can put it out this month, and so that we can start looking ahead for next February and before that to see some competition on that contract and be able to select a vendor to carry forward with our bus operations. And then a focus on our daily operations. Again, all of this leads to safe and reliable service, and I think we are making strides on that front. The other success, so you may be aware, the CATS CFO, I came in on December 1st, the CATS CFO also, the existing CATS CFO also left the organization in late November, early December. I talked to Angela Charles, and while she wasn't happy about it, she was gracious enough to offer Chad Howell, who is the Charlotte Water CFO, to be on an interim basis the CATS CFO. Chad came in literally beginning of December when I did. Chad has previously worked in CATS, and he has been very busy bringing together the budget. But the good news is the budget is stable and CATS is meeting our financial targets. As we move into the budget workshop and this year's budget, and we have discussions with the MTC, we've identified 3 priorities in the budget, and you'll hear more about this in the workshops and as we progress through the city's budget. Really, our 3 priorities are the employees, retention and recruitment, career development and training. We have a high number of vacancies in CATS, so first order of business is retain the employees we have. We know they're great employees. We need to keep them. We also need to be more aggressive and more progressive in how we recruit employees. I will say it's a double-edged sword with recruitment. Many of our positions are highly skilled and trained. So while we're focusing on retention, that's what we need to do now. We also think about recruitment and things like apprenticeships and other things, because if I were to hire an employee tomorrow, for most of our skilled jobs, they would be qualified in about 18 to 24 months. So we know that recruitment is a priority, but we also have to figure out how to retain our employees. Second, safety and security. A focus on training and additional security resources. That will be a big part of our budget. And asset preservation, additional investments in rail and bus fleet and our facilities. Continued work. So this was something that management partners mentioned, better communication. We know in any large department, it's always a challenge to communicate effectively. That doesn't mean it's impossible, and we've made our commitment to our employees to be better in how we communicate, spend more time talking to the field units to understand their needs and better support the daily operations. We need to break down silos to create a shared mission and vision, and I mean silos within CATS, within the different CATS divisions. And then specifically, we need to provide better communications around our budget process and our funding decisions. I'm going to call that collaborative budgeting. What we found, and management partners noted this, is, departments or divisions inside of CATS they'd submit all of their budget requests, and then July would come around and they'd wait to see what was funded. We need to have collaborative budgeting, and so we need to have that communication open as we go through the budget and explain budget decisions as we make them, not after the fact. We need to spend on asset management. We've already talked about CATS's need for aggressive bus replacement. We have approximately 300 buses, and approximately 30% of those are over the FTA designated useful life. We have to start reinvesting in our fleet. We must immediately implement rail fleet major maintenance program and enter into service agreements to ensure the fleet is properly maintained. And I'll come back to that on the next slide with further detail and hopefully answer your question, Ms. Johnson. And we need to conduct a full facility assessment and conduct major facility rehabilitation on our buildings. Another piece of that is immediately hiring of an asset manager for CATS, a designated position who can look at our asset management plan, which we have, and to better prepare for, budget for, and execute major capital maintenance across our fleet, across all of our assets, our fleet and our facilities. In going along with that, we need to have a 5-year financial plan. All of the things I outlined above are absolute bread and butter of a large operating department. The last piece of that goes right along with it is having a plan. We need a 5 and a 10-year outlook that thinks about these operational needs, these capital needs, and plans for those appropriately so that when the time comes to spend, we have a plan for how to make those expenditures. We have additional safety and security program needs that must be funded. And we need to develop enhanced employee training programs and focus on retention and recruitment. So the next 30 to 60 days. As I mentioned, we'll be issuing the bus operations RFP. We'll be submitting our budget to the MTC and City Council. On the April 10th Council business agenda, it will include for Council's consideration new and amended contracts with Siemens to enhance and expedite necessary rail car maintenance. So what do I mean by that? And to your question earlier, Ms. Johnson, we became aware, so the first question is, does NCDOT have any kind of oversight role with CATS? The answer is yes. The FTA and NCDOT Safety Office both have oversight responsibilities for CATS. NCDOT is the designated agency on behalf of the FTA for safety security. The second question is, are we aware of deficiencies with our rail fleet, and is NCDOT aware of that? The answer is yes. When it comes to maintenance, the answer is yes. We have been working over the last 2 weeks with NCDOT to address a maintenance issue. Without trying to go too far into the weeds, we have a light rail vehicle fleet of 42 vehicles, and they have, there was a derailment in May of 2022. One of our vehicles derailed. We have worked with NCDOT and Siemens to understand the root cause of that derailment, and the root cause has been identified as a faulty bearing, main axle bearing that bearing is present on all of the fleet. The solution to that is twofold. One, we've implemented mitigating measures to help us better monitor the fleet so that if the bearing starts to fail, we correct that or detect that before catastrophic failure, i.e. a derailment. Two, we have worked with Siemens to contract for necessary repairs of the fleet to correct the bearing issue. Now, on April 10th, what you will see is an action with two parts. The first part of that will be buying a piece of equipment that will enable us to conduct this maintenance faster. It's called a dolly, and without trying to explain all of the intricacies of that, it's needed so that we can expedite the overhaul on these bearings. The second thing you'll see is Siemens is already under contract with CATS to conduct the bearing maintenance, or what we call a truck overhaul, on the first half of the fleet, the first 20 vehicles. We are going to ask council to consider a change order to that contract to include 100% of the fleet. And we are in communications with Siemens, given our ability to buy the equipment to expedite the maintenance, what a new schedule on that maintenance is. It's safe to say that it will take some time to work through the maintenance, but that's why we have the mitigating measures. In addition to as I mentioned before, increased inspection of the vehicles, we are also currently operating on a 35-mile-an-hour speed maximum on the Blue Line, and we will continue to do that. So what that means is the Blue Line vehicles will go no faster than 35 miles an hour at any given point. We can maintain our current system, our current schedule, our current headways, operating on that. We've actually been operating with the 35-mile-an-hour maximum speed for about a week and a half. And we can maintain current schedule. So we are doing all those things to mitigate, and we are working with Siemens to expedite the repairs. In addition to that, not on April 10th, but moving forward, we will also be looking at doing requests for information and requests for proposals so that we have appropriate contracts in place so that we're not in this situation moving forward, right? So that we're doing this maintenance planned, not sort of as this arises. In the FY24 budget, let me pause there. Ms. Johnson, I believe that answered your question, but let me pause there and ask, did that answer your question?
That was a lot.
That was a lot.
Yes, you answered my question, but it prompted more questions.
Okay.
I can wait until after the presentation.
I think my next slide is the
Okay.
question slide.
All right, thank you.
So moving through, and again, these themes have repeated over and over through my 3 slides. Strategies for retention and recruitment, we have to work on that. It's absolutely necessary. Continuing our communication with staff. We need to do that, and we will do that. The budget. The budget will include an additional $3.5 million for our security contract. That represents a 50% increase in the value of the contract. And we anticipate another $3.5 million of increased spending in FY25. So 2-year plan, doubling of security contract. In addition to that, when it comes to safety and security, we are working with our training coordinator. Her name is Dr. Hall, and Dr. Hall will be working on training protocols for all operators related to customer service and de-escalation training. The best way to keep our operators safe is to keep them out of harm's way, and many times these small events can escalate and turn into major events, and so that we think it's very important to invest not only in additional security resources, but also invest in the operators to give them the tools and training needed for de-escalation and customer service. And then, as I mentioned before, we'll add a dedicated asset manager position in our next year's budget, but we will be looking to fill that position even ahead of the budget, even if that requires trading a vacant position. Questions?
Go around the table. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Cagle, first, I just want to congratulate you on stepping into something that was a very difficult situation and stabilizing the operations and having a CFO vacancy. And there's a myriad of challenges that you walked into. And it sounds like you've brought a lens of managerial acumen to your approach to leading CATS. And I think that's exactly what we need. So thank you for that. As we talk about asset preservation, and specifically I'm thinking about the bus fleet. It seems like we need to be really aggressive around our bus fleet due to the aging of the fleet.
Yes.
And also with the balance of some of our environmental goals, making sure that we're handling that appropriately. Do you believe we have the right plan for the bus fleet right now as of today? Or do we need to be increase our aggressiveness towards the replacement of the buses?
So let me answer that. Let me think through this answer carefully. I think that we have a good plan for aggressively replacing the fleet. I think that unfortunately, when you get into a situation like we are, where we have failed to do normal replacements for a period of years, you get into a situation where it becomes very difficult to get out of the hole that you're in. And that is where we're at. We believe that over the next 3 to 5 years, using the plan we have in place, we will be able to correct and move forward with the fleet. Now, that being said, we are also at a very unique time when it comes to the bus fleet, in that we have a commitment to go to zero emission fleet, but we also have some things that we need to have in place to do that in a very informed way. And so we are in this unique point in time where we need to buy buses now, but we're also looking at how we transition from traditional fuels or hybrids into full electrics. So the short answer is, I believe we have in place a plan that will get us out of the situation we are in today and will help us continue to strive to meet the CAP priorities of fully electrifying the fleet. That was a mouthful.
Thank you. That's all I had, Madam Mayor.
All right. Mr. Graham? Oh, I'm sorry, I did not see your hand. Can I just have Mr. Graham and then come to you, Mr. Driggs? Oh, Mr. Driggs, go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Graham.
I was wondering if the bearing failure was a defect of material or design. Does the manufacturer have any responsible for that, or is it up to us to pay for all the remediation?
So the short answer, it is up to the city to pay for the full cost of the repair. There is a known defect in the bearing. However, the city, those bearings are at the end of their useful life and need
out
to
of
be
warranty.
fully replaced. They are out of warranty.
The other thing is, further to Ms. Anderson's question, could you describe a little bit the financial situation of CATS right now? I mean, it seems to me when we were talking about CTC, there was a $12 million contribution from CATS, and then we stepped up with TIG and other general fund components in order to make that possible. So what is the outlook there? I mean, is CATS counting on a 1 cent sales tax in order to be able to do the things that you say we need to be able to do?
So let me start backwards and say, no, we are not. So what we do today is not contingent on additional revenues. But we also know that what we do today is going to become more expensive. We need to focus more we need to focus more of our energy and our budget on asset preservation. And so, no, the 1 cent sales tax, the question about that is not something that we're dependent on just to maintain what we have. But that does mean that as we move forward with our current revenues, they are sufficient, but we need to be careful as we start to think about changing our schedule and running service that we can't afford.
But you're saying that you can actually implement an aggressive replacement and update schedule for the fleet based on available resources?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too want to echo the comments of Councilmember Anderson. When I read the report in December during the Christmas season, I was lukewarm, right? Because it wasn't bad, but it wasn't good either, right? It outlined a lot of challenges for the organization. And I just kind of put a note here to myself, CEO vacancy, CFO vacancy, CT Center, build the temporary facility first, the Silver Line. We got to do something, RTP Dev contract, safety, security, gateway station. There's a lot of work going on over there. Right, and that's just like,
Stop reminding him.
well,
There's a lot.
there's a lot going there. And so I guess my first question is, how do you begin to prioritize? My priority first is safety and security and of the passengers and the bus riders based on the events of last year. And we need to get dollies quickly, right? Because that's, we can't have trains going off the track.
That's right.
Right? And so how do you begin to prioritize the work of the organization?
Yeah. So let me answer it this way. I think this is the answer. It's because I've asked myself the same question. December 1st, I started wondering the same thing.
Where do you start?
And haven't stopped. So here's the focus. Here's my focus. Today, the focus is on day-to-day excellence. How do we provide the services, our stated schedule? How do we keep our customers, our operators, everyone who uses our service and all of our employees safe, secure? How do we provide reliable service? So that is my focus in our operating budget as we go into this time for budget. It's really about day to day and doing what we say we're going to do, doing it well. And that's everything from safety, security, to maintenance, to reliable schedules, and that has been my focus and will continue to be my focus. Now, there are also a lot of other big things going on, Silver Line and CTC, and I'm engaged in those as well, but we have to focus on the day-to-day, right? It's the fundamentals. You have to do the fundamentals well.
Well, you answered it correctly, right? You can't do the big stuff unless you can't do the small stuff, and the small stuff is big enough, right? So you got to be able to operate day to day with a manner of excellence, and that's what I'm hoping, at least from the bus service perspective, and getting the buses and fixing the rails, those things that got to happen. But as an aside, Mr. Manager, I put an asterisk by the RTP Dev contract and RF. I think that's critically important. I put an asterisk by the CEO vacancy. I think that's critically important. One thing that the report didn't talk about, but it's governance, right? Regional governance. And at some point, I would love to have a conversation. I don't know how we do that, right? But it seems the time may be right. Based on a number of factors that we talked about regional governance with the system itself. A lot of stuff that are ahead of us that we have to get right. Certainly, these are the building blocks here, but I think there's a bigger picture at play, Mr. Manager, and as we begin to make decisions in terms of management and all these other items, as well as things that we always talk about in terms of regional plans and mobility, et cetera. this may be the right time to have that conversation. Thank you.
Mr. Graham, if I can add, we are having that conversation right now with Connect Beyond, that all of the existing counties surrounding Mecklenburg, as well as every town in Mecklenburg, is working through the COGS initiative. I co-chair that with Mayor Hennant out of Kannapolis. And I want to say first, the MTC has said that they believe that an authority is important for our planning and what we want to do. And the question has been, how do we start that so that we build trust among all of our, all of the things that Brent talked about, reliability, the equipment. So the very first one was perhaps some steps towards how do we make sure that you have a bus pass that you can take among the region, that you can ride the bus from the Kannapolis bus, the Concord bus, our CATS, all of those. But building on that, then how do we get to the place that we have a transit authority that has the appropriate representation? There are many models out there that are being discussed in this group. Again, it's a county and cities across our footprint that's in the COG area, and the commitment is at some point for us to have that authority that would allow people to invest in mobility, as well as to make it a regional investment and have the right type of membership. And I think that actually the MTC is not a bad model. Everybody has an equal vote. Everyone that participates financially is in the room for major decision-making. But I too want to say to Brent, he's doing an exceptional job and challenging the MTC to do many of these things that we have to have done. So I think that at some point, and not in the not too distant future, we will actually have some kind of discussion around what does a transit authority look like for our region. So now I think we're going to, Mr. Bakar, did you want to also address the transit authority issue? Okay. Well, we'll come back, and Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. In terms of reliability, does CATS have any enforcement options for towing vehicles in the way of trains outside of contacting CMPD?
Yes, so we have currently entered into, we are looking to enter into agreements with private towing companies to be able to tow vehicles. So right now, what would happen if someone is parked on the gold line in the right-of-way, a transit officer or a CATS safety security officer would arrive. They would write the ticket, $25 fine. If the person is able to move, and they would also contact a private towing agency. If the person is able to move the vehicle before the tow truck arrives, then they walk away with a ticket. If they are not, they walk away with a ticket and a visit to the impound yard that vehicle is being taken to.
How, do you have a time frame for when?
I will follow up with you. I will follow up with you.
So in terms of, you mentioned that there'll be an increase in costs of security services. Have you looked into the ability to use local law enforcement for public safety and security? And then also, as a part of that question, I know you said you will increase, the costs for security are going to increase, but we know prices are going up on everything. Is that going to be additional service, or is that just, a kind of baseline service?
Yes, so even if we weren't increasing the amount of dedicated resources of staff, it would go up. Inflation and security contracts, security contractors have been hit hard with vacancies, but this is an increase of personnel as well. To your question about law enforcement or sworn officers, there is a component included in the contract for off-duty officers to provide services as well. As we transition, so you will see the RFP has been completed, and we will be on April 10th, bringing the contract before you for consideration. We are also working with CMPD as we transition from one contractor to the next. But there are the ability to have sworn officers as part of our safety and security staffing.
So a last question I have, I've been asking this in kind of a couple different forums in different ways. I know we're doing some work, or believe we're doing some work with CMS to see how we can do things, for instance, around ridership, for instance, around, I think, bus passes for employees, as well as high school students. You know, in a lot of ways, CMS runs a public transit agency, in some ways bigger than CATS, in some ways perhaps redundant to CATS. They have the same issues that relate to workforce for drivers, as well as mechanics to upkeep the fleet. I know that they don't have, their drivers don't have the same kind of regulations as CATS drivers, but I believe they're could be on the way to getting the types of training that's needed. For instance, I don't think they have a full CDL, but they have a CDL permit or something like that. But as we continue to grow, as we continue to look at the way we change our bus lines to better serve neighborhoods and ridership, as they are looking at the way they're building their school system and where their schools go, are we having any communications with CMS on ways we may be able to consolidate bus routes and therefore also consolidate fleets, workforces, and maintenance operations?
So, Mayor Pro Tem, I'll try to address that. So, as you know, CATS is an enterprise fund, and so it's based on the revenue that they collect, not something like the general fund. The short answer is yes. I've had conversations with you. I've had conversations with some of the other council members, as well as some of the folks from CMS, about what are some opportunities at a minimum, at what you started off with, is that group of students 9th through 12th grade, in terms of access, much like all of our employees have access to all of the different modes that CATS provides for about $30-ish a year. So certain things we're trying to talk with them about that we think they would be helpful.
Yeah, I imagine CATS also has a planning department, or has planners. I wonder are your planners talking to CMS planners to understand where residential populations are and where schools are or will be going, so that we can, as we're looking to reimagine, our bus routes, that they are in fact serving those populations that will be getting bus passes. And we have buses that are going from where people live to where they're going to school, for instance.
Yes, sir. I can provide you more information on that as a follow-up. Absolutely. And as Mr. Jones said, we are always willing, we're interested in having the conversation with CMS about transit passes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Cagle, thank you for stepping in and adding yet an additional hat to your skill set. I have two questions for you. One is a follow-up, because you did mention the possibility of off-duty law enforcement. For me, that triggered a thought of a different conversation we've had regarding paying access for our CMPD officers and them having to take on basically part-time jobs. So I want to make sure, Mr. Manager, that on our end, that we're tracking these hours so that we don't have people that are overworked and extra tired when they are interacting with our community members because of the need of working these additional shifts, versus looking at creating a RFP and identifying a local private company or entity. Now, I wouldn't say necessarily security company, but we have a lot of partners that we already work with. And we have a number of individuals that are, that very well could be in that position, whether it's the position of writing that particular ticket and or helping with that towing. We have a lot of programs that this city funds in partnership with the county, we need to start looking at how we're connecting the dots with where we're providing funding for training and support and how that's creating jobs or creating employment. The other piece, specific question I have is we have a goal for fully electric busing. Are we also having a simultaneous, not only conversations, but have we started the training, whether it is through UNC, Central Piedmont, or specialized training for electricians locally so that we don't have what we currently have and that is a number of buses that are sitting in need of repair, because we also have to take into consideration out of our fleet, if we have 80 to 100 buses that are not in operation because they're sitting in need of repair, do we have a gap, again, tying in when we're funding programs through any of our partners? And we know that technology is very important and sustainability is important for the goals of this council and previous council. How are we connecting those dots? Are we looking, have you had a chance to have conversations regarding training specifically on the repair and maintenance of electric vehicles, either through Central Piedmont, UNC, any of our partners? Have you had a chance to have those conversations?
Yeah, so I think, so there's two things. One, Catherine, our sustainability specialist inside of CATS, is already starting to think about how we address those needs, and we know that they're coming. And two, she's starting to have those conversations, and that will be part of the zero emissions fleet transition plan, the ZEFTP, that's a mouthful. Zero emissions fleet transition plan. I think the last time when we were talking about bus replacements, I said that we had a contractor who is looking at infrastructure. The contractor is STV. What they're doing is creating a zero emissions fleet transition plan, and that plan should be complete by October, which lines up with the battery electric bus pilot program that we currently have going on.
So the zero emissions fleet transition plan, does that plan include specified training opportunities with a goal of, we know that we have the opportunity to create 20 jobs, 10 jobs, 5 jobs by the end of 2023, additional 8 or 3 jobs by 24? Are we looking at a clear plan so that we can say by 2033, since we're in 2023, a 10-year window, we should have X number of in-house trained individuals, and also correlate that will reduce X costs for maintenance of loss of access, loss of having that particular vehicle being inside of a storage unit, or having to pay to transport it to another location in order to have it repaired, wait 4 weeks to 15 weeks to get it back. If we can capture those numbers, I think that will help to, one, educate council, but also for us to be able to share with our community, here's how your dollars are being invested. Because when we talk about the role of the CCC and we talk about the role of CATS with anyone but the city of Charlotte. So when we're showing that not only we care about the environment, but we care about employment, and we look at the federal government and we look at recent language that have come from this particular administration, specifically on Made in America, Made in the USA, creating opportunities and environmentally friendly and sustainable funding that has been identified. I think we have some real opportunities on being at the forefront of something different, so we can do our own version of what's the car company we always see on TV that makes the car mats, that's been around since the 70s. So on Christmas time, you know the company, you always see the commercials where they come in, they put all the car mats in your car. But it was made in the USA, and it was an unrealistic concept for a lot of people for a short period of time until it was done. Well, we have that same opportunity of making sure that we create the connections and create our own local group, because imagine the additional revenue stream that can be created when our regional partners are sending their buses here, opposed to sending them to a whole nother state. Thank
Ms. Mayfield, I'll add, it's going to drive me crazy because it's right here. I know exactly what commercial you're talking about, and I
It's
can't think of the name.
You
There
could
it
have
is.
jumped that
There
in.
it is.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, WeatherTech. Thank you very much. But thinking about that, we might have some major opportunities here. Thank you,
Yes,
Mayor.
ma'am.
You're welcome. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to go back to the derailment. You said the derailment was in May of 2022?
May 21st of 2022.
Okay. So was the NCDOT deficiencies in response to the derailment, or was there a separate report or audit, just standard?
So again, so the derailment occurred. There was a root cause analysis conducted by a contractor to Siemens, specifically asked or tasked with evaluating the root cause of the derailment. What they determined is the root cause was catastrophic failure of the main axle bearing on one of the trucks on this particular vehicle. They further determined that the axle seized, the wheel stopped turning, that created the derailment, and the cause for that was the failure of the bearing, i.e. the bearing, the seal around the bearing became cracked, water entered the bearing, and the bearing seized up because it was no longer properly lubricated. So that's what they determined. We communicated that with NCDOT, and then we started to work on the corrective action plan and how we mitigate for that situation. It came to my attention about 2 to 3 weeks ago when NCDOT contacted us, and they asked us to provide them with a written document that was a corrective action plan for this with mitigating measures, and to revisit the ultimate corrective actions that are necessary. And so that's where we are today.
So you mentioned FTC, and you mentioned an FTC audit and NCDOT. In times of a catastrophe such as this one, would the FAA also be involved?
So the FTA is our overriding federal agency, and they have tasked NCDOT Safety Office with local oversight of safety security related to our system, to our rail system.
Okay. I know this is a lot, and perhaps we can talk about this in a committee meeting, Mayor. So you just found out about this 2 weeks ago. I think I can speak for council that we didn't know about this. So that's concerning, and maybe this was the time that you're bringing it to our attention, but I would think that that's something that council would have or should have known. Also, if the trains are currently riding at 35 miles per hour because all of these trains have this equipment on them, what's the normal speed for the train?
There's two ways to answer that. The maximum speeds under normal conditions for the Blue Line can reach no greater than or maximum of 55 miles an hour. The average speed across the system is approximately between 40 and 45 miles an hour.
Okay. And are we certain that the trains are safe running at 35 miles per hour?
Yes,
Until we can replace?
So let me answer it this way. We are certain that we have mitigating measures in place, and we feel that the vehicles that are running, we can catch the bearing issue before it becomes catastrophic failure, right? So we have mitigating measures to help us identify bearing failures before it becomes a catastrophic failure, right? Because when you think about a bearing, what happens is as water gets in that bearing, the grease that's normally in that sealed bearing starts to seep out. And then the bearing corrodes, and it doesn't run smoothly. And so over time, that friction makes it heat, and ultimately the axle stops turning or seizes. That doesn't happen immediately. That takes time. And so what we have are a series of mitigating measures to allow us to detect that in advance of a catastrophic failure. But ultimately, what we have is a request to Siemens to expedite the replacement of those bearings as quickly as possible. But again, I will mention there are 42 rail vehicles. Each rail vehicle has 3 sets of bearings, right? So if you think about, there's the car and then it sits on top of those wheels, there are 3 different sets of wheels, and each of those have the bearings and the axles. So it's 42 times the number of bearings per car. And so it is a very large undertaking, and we are working with Siemens now. I sent Chad and the former COO out to California last week to have a conversation with Siemens. They are committed to giving us an expedited schedule, but right now the schedule they've given us was really determined by our inability to send them the equipment. That's why we have to buy the dollies. So to put it in perspective, we had 1 dolly set, and that meant that we could send 1 set of the wheels, if you will, trucks is what we call them, to California to be repaired at any given time. We are purchasing an additional 6 sets of dollies, so we will have a total of 7 dollies, 7 dolly sets, and we are working to see if there is another transit agency, I won't say which one in case they say no, but we're working to see if another transit agency will loan us a dolly set so that we can send 8 sets of the wheels, if you will, the trucks, at a time versus our 1 set at a time. So we are working to very aggressively remediate or fix this problem as quickly as possible. Siemens, again, last week was the meeting. They owe us a response within the next week or 10 days. So, and we will continue reaching out to them daily to ask them as soon as possible, please give us an amended schedule.
Okay, like I said, it's a lot going on, even when we, the CEO and the COO now, and the CFO are all, I guess, vacant positions. So I would just ask, Mayor, if during the corrective action plan, how long is what's the period for the corrective action plan?
So the original schedule, again, predicated on 1 set of dollies at a time for half of the fleet, would have been completion sometime in the middle of 2025, roughly July of 2025. That was for half of the fleet. We hope that by more than, doubling, right, by increasing 8-fold, that we can significantly reduce that. The second thing I will say is the original contract was for half of the fleet. We are going to immediately expand that. On April 10th, we will ask you to consider a change order to that contract to include the entire fleet so that there will be no break between. We'll start with the oldest vehicles and we will move through until every vehicle is complete.
Well, thank you for the work you're doing, and thank you, Mr. Jones, for the update. I would ask if the Transportation Committee could maybe take a deeper dive into the reports and the corrective action plans so that we are proactive on this. This is something I think our voters would expect us to be aware of and have oversight of. So if we could have a referral to the Transportation Committee so that we're able to see those reports and really be aware of the deficiencies and the problems. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Brett, let me just echo some of the comments my colleagues have made, congratulating you on your leadership to CATS. Secondly, thank you for putting in the budget, both FY24 and FY25, $3.5 million for a security contract. In our strategy session, Brent, I think you were there, we saw our consultant talking about how transit system was getting federal dollars, and above us were those who had an authority. In your limit review of other transit system, have you reviewed other transit system that has an authority structure?
No, sir. So let me back up. Management Partners was not, part of the scope of their work was not to look at governance structure.
Okay.
That was not part of the scope.
Okay.
But the reason it came up and was part of their report was they did conduct interviews with 19 key staff, as Ms. Babson noted, and confusion or clarity around governing structure as it pertains to city council and MTC roles was one of those themes that came up frequently in those staff interviews. So they reported back on it, but it was not something that they really dug into. What I would say is that was identified as an area for future review.
Okay.
For the policymaking groups.
Okay. And last but not least, you put in the PowerPoint procurement and contract. And I'd like to ask the question, are we working very closely with our CBI on procurement and contract to make sure we're using our CBI firms when appropriate?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So one of the things that came up in Management Partners was not really around our commitment to DBE, our DBE goals or our MWSBE goals. It was really about the transition that was started 3 or 4 years ago around procurement, CATS procurement, city procurement. It was really about that transition, not so much the goals that we have and that we meet.
Last thing, Madam Mayor and Council, this came up in our Transportation Committee discussion about having RAV, DAV come to council. So it'd be good if in the future we can schedule that. I think most of us who've been around this table for a long time have never met a representative from this company. And so to help foster a better relationship, I think it'd be great we can engage them going forward.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Molina?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would be remiss to not echo everybody around the table. Brent, congratulations. I think the courage to step up and see a piece of the organization in such need and be willing to do it. I think that part stood out to me when actual Manager Jones said you came to him, to say that you were wanting to take on the challenge. I think that speaks a lot to who I believe you are as a human, and it's showing in just a small amount of time how you've been able to set a path and a direction for the organization, and I'm very excited to see what we do going forward. So congratulations to you. And I also, as I think this is the Master of Science and Management thing starting to peek its head out. We had a CFO actually come from another organization to say that they can actually be malleable and step into a role of leadership within CATS. And what that means and what that, speaks to me, internal hires and growth within an organization speaks to leadership, right? I think if every time we need leadership, we have to go outside, that's a failure of leadership. But when we can actually organically from within have people ready to step into those roles, I think that's a testament of good leadership. So I was very excited to hear that. And so my estimation of CATS, particularly thinking of the East Side and what, the CATS organization will mean to, I guess, the residents of the East Side, I see this organization being the answer to our short-term infrastructure, transportation infrastructure needs. We have, aspirational goals that will be long-term infrastructure needs, but our short-term infrastructure needs are really going to be based heavily on what you can do within the CATS organization. And so I'm really excited to see how we build that out. And I don't want to start putting a whole lot of pressure on this. What I see are a lot of the sentiments of what we need to get started on a great program. And I'm excited to see us go from good to great. Being a person who listens to NPR religiously every single day, I've heard from the outside that they would actually like for us to be able to address, the organization that RAP-TDEV, the council. So I'm actually interested in seeing that, and I think a lot of our listenership and our, the people who pay attention to what we're doing would like to see them actually address and speak to the council as well. So I would like to add that. Yes, and also, finally, I think CMS just going back to what Mayor Pro Tem said about CMS, I'm a CMS parent. I have 2 kids in CMS, and I know that they're going through a lot of different changes this year with their transportation plan, and particularly for children that are in magnet schools. So right now, the transportation plan, and I don't want to claim to be an expert on this, but if you're a parent of a CMS student who is actually going to a magnet school, you actually have to take the child to their home school, and then they have to actually take transportation from their home school to their magnet school. And this is particularly going to affect the students that are in high school programs. And so I'm wondering, and I'm hoping that we have some deep conversations with CMS to see how we can play a role in resolving some of those issues, because, you know, the schedules for some of those schools, the schools are actually going to let out at around 2:30 in the afternoon. And I don't think that's going to be highly conducive for parents at work. So some of those parents will inevitably, I feel like, have to have their children take our bus system, right? And so I'm hoping that we can continue some of those, you know, like I said, not to belabor what he said, but I did write that down because I know that that's something that's absolutely coming down the pipeline for our next school year. And so we will need to be strategic in how we partner with them and have those conversations so that we can be solution-oriented. And finally, as a bonus, every time I think of CATS, you know, I think about a railway, and what we put next to a rail, it automatically flourishes. But we don't really have that with CATS. You know, you have a bus, stop, and there's really nothing that says, infrastructure, or improvement. I'd like for us to think about that. And, like, as we think out, like, what's possible with CATS, we don't really think, what does it mean? If you're riding the bus, a bus stop should mean something, right? Like having a bus stop that's, close to transit, that is transit, that should mean something in Charlotte, I believe. Right now, it really doesn't have the same sentiment, right? You know that rail is coming and you get everything surrounding it, but if you got a bus stop, it's just like, oh, that's a bus stop, So I wonder how we can start to think about that in alignment. Like the two, one shouldn't mean something as opposed to the other. I think they both should mean something kind of concurrently, because they are access to transportation. I know they won't mean what a rail system means, but they should mean something, right? They should mean that, there's access to transportation here, and so what does that mean around it? How do we think that out? So I know that that's something just a plug, but maybe we could talk about that offline. I got some ideas.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will be doing social districts presentation during the manager's report. And Mr. Bakari, would you have your comments? And then we're about, I think, 10 or 15 minutes late to downstairs. And so as soon as Mr. Bakari is completed, we'll go with his comments. We will go downstairs. We have a public forum tonight as well.
I speak on behalf of all the 1110 WBT listeners, and I will just tell you very specifically, good work in your time there. Purposely, I think a lot of us have been trying not to bother you so you can get your legs under you and figure out what's going on. Just a heads up for when we go into the budget conversations, when we meet with you next, I think it's going to be really important for you to bring some numbers along with you. Particularly around, if we're talking about, the CATS employee base, numbers of, hiring backlogs or, safety issues, morale, the things that we're trying to address there on the assets themselves, particularly the buses. I really want you to come and bring forth the measurements and the trade-offs between the CAP and between the CATS asset investments, because I have a deep hunch after that last conversation we had a while back that we are trying to jam a bit of a square peg into a round hole, given that the technology around a lot of this stuff isn't as evolved and advanced as it needs to be scalable at the use. And I really want to make sure we're not making decisions to delay purchasing of the assets we need because we're trying to kind of do this CAP a little bit of a dance. So that, and then particularly, I know you got a ton cut out for you with everything we talked about, but it still goes back to the last I heard the stat updated, was it on average takes somebody 90 minutes to get somewhere on, in a bus in this town to their ultimate destination. That's the measurement right there. And where we are in our strategic plans to bring that down is what I'd really love to hear, particularly associated with the budget ask. Because again, we around this table, we cannot manage what we don't measure. So just a friendly heads up. I know that that's a lot to ask in 90 days, but just to know as you come into the budget conversations, that would be much appreciated.
We'll be ready.
All right, well, let's get downstairs and be ready for our public forum. And everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining us for the Charlotte City Council February 24th business meeting, and I want to call this meeting to order. So we'll begin with introductions. We'll start with our city attorney, and then following those introductions, we'll continue to the next step of our meeting.
Good evening, Patrick Baker, City Attorney.
Good evening. I'm Victoria Watlington, your Charlotte City Council member representing District 3.
Good evening, Dante Anderson, District 1.
Charles Picard, District 6.
Good evening, Ed Driggs, District 7.
Malcolm Graham, District 2.
Braxton Winston, Mayor Pro Tem.
Vi Lau serving as mayor.
Marcus Jones, City Manager.
Good evening, Luana Mayfield, Council at Large.
Good evening, Renee Johnson, District 4.
Good evening, everyone. James Mitchell, serving at large.
Good evening, Marjorie Molina, serving Charlotte City Council District 5.
Stephanie Kelly, City Clerk.
All right. Our city council meetings begin with an expression to help solemnize our decision-making, our conversation, so that we can live and have the respect that you have for us, that we can return that same respect to you. And so we do this that in any number of different ways, and each council person generally brings something that's very special to them. So tonight, we're going to have Mayor Pro Tem Winston give our remarks and to set our agenda for today and our discussion for our meetings. And following the Mayor Pro Tem, we will all ask you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. So Mayor Pro Tem Winston.
Well, thank you. In honor of this, I'll try to be a little short and sweet here, Mayor Lau, so maybe that trend will follow for tonight. But in honor of this being the council meeting ahead of St. Patrick's Day, I went and did a little looking and found a little Irish prayer called God and His Angels. May you have a world of wishes at your command, God and His angels close to hand, friends and family, their love impart, and Irish blessings in your heart. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, if you'll now stand for our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. This is the time that we set aside to have our residents come down and share any conversation or question, comment that they have with the full council. This is we call it our public forum. Each speaker gets 3 minutes, and I really literally mean 3 minutes to speak. In addition to that, we also would say that if you are petitioning us to do or take an action, that the city manager will work with his team to contact you to follow up for any action that you want to take. We've got a great team of staffers here that help us do our jobs better. And so with that, I'm going to start with our public forum, and our first speaker is Jamie Carr, followed by James Lee. Mr. Carr, or Ms. Carr, excuse me, Ms. Carr and Mr. Lee. We have 2 podiums, so we can have 2 people get on either side to be prepared. All right? Be careful of those steps. It's pretty steep out there. Please join us at this side, on my left, your right. And Mr. Lee. Ms. Carr, please.
Yes, my name is Jamie Carr. I am the niece of the late Darrell Gaston. My concern is I am in temporary housing. I have 1 year to find permanent housing before I am back on the street. What are we going to do about this?
Ms. Carr, we will connect you with someone that has the potential to provide housing, and we'll do that tomorrow with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Lee.
Good evening, everybody. It's been a while since I've spoken before you. Congratulations to the new council people. Welcome back, Councilwoman Mayfield. My name is James Lee. I'm a longtime resident of Charlotte, born and raised. I was born in Good Samaritan Hospital. I want to just drop a seed in your hearts and your mind, and especially to the staff over here, about the, I don't know if you guys know about the Home for All initiative that is looking to have Charlotte be a national leader in ending and preventing homelessness in Charlotte, where the mission is where homelessness is rare, brief, and non-recurring. Charlotte is struggle. It's a great city. We're struggling in the street. You guys have seen me in the street. I've seen some of you guys in the street. But I just wanted to let you guys know about that. I don't know if the staff has spoken to you guys about that, but the United Way is going to quarterback this initiative where we are trying to make Charlotte better for everybody, not just for the 100 people that's moving here every day, but for the people who I serve, which are the people who cannot afford to live here and they can't afford to leave. And a lot of folks are in that position, even some of the people that work for you in this building. So just want to make sure that you guys understand that we're still out here working with you. We want to work with you to make Charlotte better. And I look forward to speaking with each and every one of you in the future about what my role is going to be with just trying to market it, make sure that folks in the street know about it, because I've come off addiction and homelessness, and some of you guys know my story. Some of you don't, but I'm very proud to live in Charlotte. I'm very proud of what the mayor's doing and what the city council's doing. But I think this initiative with the Home for All, we have to make sure that everybody in Charlotte has an opportunity to have a base of operations and have a place to live, just like the young lady just said earlier. We have to do a better job, so I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee, and thank you for your advocacy for housing and homelessness. All right, our next two speakers are Thomas Talbot and Alexandra Badgett. Is it Thomas Talbot? Talbot? All right, so I think we'll have Mr. David Hans following the speaker of Ms. Badgett.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and the City of Charlotte. I know it's a lot of us up here, but we will keep it to 3 minutes. My name is Alexandra Badgett. I'm honored to be here on behalf of the Miss Queen City Metrolina Scholarship Organization. We are a local preliminary competition for the state title of Miss North Carolina and the national title of Miss America. Miss America is the #1 leading provider of scholarships for young women in our nation, but not only do they provide scholarships, they provide the opportunity for young women to showcase their passion, showcase their talents, and also showcase their passion for service. I'm joined by 3 of our 4 delegates who are going to introduce themselves and share their why. They'll be competing in June for the titles of Miss North Carolina and Miss North Carolina's teen. First, we have Miss Queen City's teen.
Hello everyone, my name is Carrie Rader, Miss Queen City's teen. My community service initiative is Carrie Cares, where I encourage the youth to volunteer. Some volunteering I've had the chance to do are tour drives and food drives for homeless shelters throughout the area. I've been a part of this organization since I was 6 years old in the Carolina Princess Mentorship Program, and now I get to represent my community as a teen title holder. I have been with this organization for such a long time because I really agree with their commitment to preparing great women for the world and preparing the world for great women. They give out so many scholarships, and I'm very grateful to be a part of this organization. Thank you all for letting me speak. Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Metrolina's team.
Hi everyone, my name is Annika Schneider. I'm an 18-year-old from Greystone Day School, and I will be attending Pfeiffer University's Honors College in the fall. I have been in the Miss America organization since I was a little girl, about 5 or 6 years old, and fell in love with the public speaking and confidence skills that it gave me. And today I am a literacy advocate with my community service initiative, Read With Me, where I promote literacy as an educational and therapeutic opportunity for everyone throughout the Charlotte area.
Thank you.
It's okay. Next, we have Miss Metrolina.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Claire Music, Miss Metrolina. I'm also a student at Appalachian State studying clinical mental health counseling. By the end of this year, I will be a licensed counselor, so it's no surprise that my community service initiative is focused on wellness. Live Well is what I call it, and it's focused on giving our children, our future world changers, the tools they need to kind of break away from what society and pop culture says about taking care of ourselves and instead turn inward and think think about what actually works for them in their wellness journey. I personally believe that health education, social emotional learning, and reflective thinking can give our children what they need to not only feel their best, but reach their full potential and make a huge impact on the world. We really appreciate everybody's time and attention today, and we would love to invite all of you to connect with us. We're very easy to find on social media through Miss Queen City Metrolina. We're on Instagram and Facebook, and we would really love to hear from you about ways that we can connect with Charlotte and serve everyone here.
Thank you very much. It's nice to have you all recognized. All right, David Hans, followed by Veronica Wallace. Ms. Wallace? Veronica Wallace?
Good evening. My name is David Hannes. I'm here again for the Woody Point Road situation. I'm sure some members of council are getting tired of me, and after 5 visits to council meetings over the past 12 months, I'm growing weary of coming here too. Maybe we can make this meeting count. I sincerely hope so. It's time to put Woody Point Road and its street classification issue in the rearview mirror. Don't you agree? So help me to help you resolve this awkward situation. You should realize by now that I'm not going away until the council corrects this mistake. If I wasn't 100% sure the city made a mistake in classifying Woody Point Road, I wouldn't be here again tonight to be your conscience. You only have to look at the evidence I've amassed to know I'm right and that you've been misled by city staff. While I realize it may be difficult for council to accept the fact that CDOT and planning can't always be depended upon, in this instance, they most definitely cannot. You just have to understand that the city is not entitled to their own set of facts, and that what city staff says is not the gospel, especially in regard to Woody Point Road. I do want to acknowledge that a few caring and open-minded members of the council have listened to me and lent their support, and for this I'm very grateful. What I don't understand is how the rest of council can just look the other way regarding this simple and straightforward issue. I do know that I will prevail eventually because the truth is on my side, but I think it's a shame that council and city leaders have, for the most part, not taken me seriously. I don't want to sound conceited, but I've done my homework and I know what I'm talking about. Council just needs to give me a chance to meet with them and listen to what I have to say. There's also one other issue that I'd like to make council aware of if you are not already. I've been accused of threatening the city by the city attorney. I can assure council that the last thing I want to do is bring legal action against the city. I just want council to correct the street classification of Woody Point Road. I don't think that's too much to ask. I believe the city attorney has done me an injustice by telling at least one council member who was supporting me not to have anything more to do with me. It appears the city attorney doesn't care about the facts, only how he can undermine my efforts to save Woody Point Road and intimidate and harass me in the process. The question we should all be asking ourselves is, why is the city going to such great lengths to destroy Woody Point Road, an insignificant little street in southwestern Mecklenburg County? It just doesn't make any sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't think I have any other speakers signed up, Madam Clerk.
Madam Mayor.
I thought that was for item 10. Massey Flippin? No. Oh, sorry, didn't turn over the sheet of paper.
And before you did that, Mayor,
There's a question.
I had a question for Mr. Hahn.
No, we don't do questions. We have to give that to the manager, and then they do the follow-up.
So are we saying we're referring Mr. Hans to the manager? Because I know I've met with him as well, so that's why
Yes,
I think
usually
there
at
was
the
a...
end of this, because we can't address everything immediately, we ask the manager to address it and send something out tomorrow.
Oh, okay. So we're asking the manager.
Right.
So,
He's got that.
thought
But if
we
you
could-
have the
I'll ask
specific,
him a
okay?
question offline.
Thank you. All right, our last speaker is Art Vandahar. I hope I did something close. Vardan.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I have a lot to say, so excuse me if I'm speaking fast. My name is Art Vardanian, and I represent the Armenian American community of Charlotte. I'm a descendant of an Armenian genocide survivor. Having fled persecution at home, thousands of Armenians used to be grateful to the Queen City for having welcomed them and given them a life of freedom where being Armenian doesn't get them killed. I say used to be because sadly this is no longer the case. The mayor of Charlotte now seems to endorse the ethnic cleansing of Armenians. Having blockaded 120,000 Armenian civilians, including 30,000 children, with decreasing food, medical, and fuel supplies for over 3 months in below freezing temperatures, Azerbaijan, as we speak, is engaged in ethnic cleansing. I have with me here an order by the International Court of Justice at The Hague calling on Azerbaijan to lift the blockade. Our own State Department has done the same. How does this relate to the mayor of Charlotte? Leaving aside her deafening silence, the mayor of Charlotte has signed not 1 but 4 proclamations declaring Azerbaijan Republic Day, Azerbaijan Solidarity Day, Azerbaijan Independence Day as it carries out ethnic cleansing. I cannot imagine a U.S. mayor declaring Russian Independence Day in the middle of the Ukraine invasion. As I'm sure you all will agree, such a thing would never happen. This begs the questions, are our lives worth any less? Why are the refugees from the previous cycle of violence perpetrated by Azerbaijan reading proclamations about their mayor supporting and whitewashing an ethnic cleansing campaign against Armenians today? We tried to reach out, but we're told the city doesn't get involved in foreign affairs. That would be understandable, except it's not true. Allow me to explain. One of the proclamations comments on the status of Nagorno-Karabakh, an active war zone and a disputed territory which the U.S. has a mandate to find a peaceful resolution for. This is in direct contradiction with official U.S. foreign policy. 2 other proclamations celebrate an entity called Azerbaijan Democratic Republic, which is a no longer existing pseudo-state that lays claim to more than half of the internationally recognized territory of the Republic of Armenia. Now, Mayor, I want you to tell the Armenian community that you do not get involved in foreign affairs. That is not what these proclamations say. Freedom House ranks Azerbaijan lower than Afghanistan on freedom metrics as one of the worst dictatorships on the planet, and you praise it as a bastion of, quote, democracy and freedom, peaceful coexistence, and interfaith harmony between Christians and Muslims. This is not misinformation, this is disinformation. I have an entire stack of news articles about the deliberate destruction of Armenian Christian heritage condemned by The Hague, the desecration of Armenian cemeteries, the shelling of an Armenian cathedral, the beheading of Armenian captured civilians, the torture of Armenian POWs, all of this on video, all of it no more than 3 years old.
Thank you very much for the information. I appreciate it.
Could I hand you this packet?
Yes,
I would
please
like
do,
you
to the city clerk or to the police officer there. Okay? Thank you very much. All right, Madam Clerk, I think that is our public forum speakers list. And so now we'll go to the section where this council does talk about awards and recognitions, and we have 2 proclamations that we'd like to present today. The first one is a proclamation that really impacts the caliber and the quality of people that work for the city of Charlotte, and it is about a subject that many of us don't think very often about. The subject matter for this is the public procurement profession. And so I'm going to read a section of it that's, to me, very important. Whereas the procurement professionals of the City of Charlotte have received the Sustained Professional Purchasing Award for demonstrating excellence in purchasing standards from the North Carolina Association of Governmental Purchasing for 22 consecutive years. And whereas they practice the public procurement values and principles of accountability, ethics, impartiality, professionalism, service, and transparency established by the National Institute of Governmental Purchasing. And whereas this purchasing organization and other international associates celebrate March as Procurement Month, I'm not quite sure why it's March, guys, in order to expand the awareness of being a purchasing professional. Say that 3 times. That role is for government officials and to serve the public. Now, therefore, I, Vi Alexander Lyles, Mayor of Charlotte, do hereby proclaim March 2023 as Public Procurement Month in Charlotte and urge all of us to observe it and recognize the importance of this profession in our city. With that, I'd like to turn this over to Ms. Askew, the proclamation, and say thank you for the work that you do. I'm sorry, Phil. I'm sorry. I never can figure out Renee and Phil.
Just alike.
Easy to understand.
And now I'd like to recognize Councilmember Johnson for a proclamation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, my name is Renee Johnson. I'm the District 4 representative, and I'm honored to recognize Brain Injury Awareness Month. March is Brain Injury Awareness Month. This is actually the third year that we're reading the proclamation, so I want to thank Mayor Lyles and also Commissioner Chair George Dunlap for their support of this. Whereas more than 2.8 million Americans sustain a brain injury every year, and over 5.3 million Americans live with a brain injury-related disability. And whereas over 80,000 people in North Carolina will sustain a brain injury this year, and many survivors will be left permanently disabled. And whereas acquired brain injury includes traumatic brain injuries sustained from a blunt force trauma, and non-traumatic brain injury is from strokes, aneurysms, tumors, infections, and even COVID. And whereas active duty and reserve military service members are at an increased risk for sustaining brain injury, and whereas research on abused women show that 40 to 90% of victims of domestic violence suffer physical injuries to the head, and whereas research shows that up to 50% of homeless individuals and up to 85% of incarcerated adults report having experienced the physical injury to their head. And whereas public awareness and understanding of the dangers, prevention, and treatment of these injuries and effects on the family are critical to help aid individuals in recovery. Now, therefore, I, Alexander Lyles, Mayor of Charlotte, and George Dunlap, Chair of the Mecklenburg Board of County Commissioners, do hereby proclaim March 2023 as Brain Injury Awareness Month in Charlotte and Mecklenburg County, and commend its observance to all citizens. So thank you. I do want to present this proclamation to Alicia Street. She's with the Brain Injury Advisory Council, and also like to recognize Jonna Welter. She serves on the Brain Injury Advisory Council. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for being here. I would also like to say thank you to Michael Smith. There are buildings in the city of Charlotte today that will be lighting up the sky in green in observance for brain injury awareness. So thank you, Charlotte City Partners and the other businesses uptown that will be recognizing. So thank you. Thank you for coming out. Good to see you. Thank you. There you go. Thank you. You too. That's okay. That's okay. Nice to meet you. I'm going to. We'll be COVID through this. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and then I think we have one more celebratory moment, and hopefully these young people will come down and someone will organize their effort. This weekend in the Dean Dome, the Myers Park boys basketball team brought home the 4A trophy for our city. Those Mustangs ready, Mr. Bakari, to come down.
I've been practicing with them all year, Madam Mayor. I've made them what they are today. I believe that's the consensus.
What costume did they have you in? The Okay, thank you very much. Now let's continue to our business agenda.
That was good.
We're going to start with a public hearing on proposed charter amendments to ordinance to change the form of government. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers? We have a speaker on this issue. Mr. Flippin?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Let me find out who it
Merrill.
is.
David Merrill.
David Merrill. Mr. Merrill, come on down.
I told him he can say yeah,
I just wanted to welcome you. Thank you. Please, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor and Council and members of the media for allowing me an opportunity to address you this evening. Mayor Lyles, you, as mayor, and former Mayor Pro Tem Julie Eisel created an ad hoc Citizens Advisory Committee on Government to review the current structure of the Charlotte City Council and to make recommendations regarding the term limits, term length, and methods of implementation of the changes. The majority of council members seem to be either choosing to partially or wholly ignore the recommendations of that committee that you created and staffed, but you're more than happy to take that pay increase that they recommended. The recommendations of the committee are that changes should be implemented by citizens' referendum. That committee has recommended nonpartisan elections and term limits, but it appears that most members of the council are ignoring these recommendations. You should only have 4-year terms if you have term limits. Most members of council are supporting the recommendation of staggered elections, which would allow district representatives to run at large while keeping their seat safe. At-large representatives, you may want to look at the person beside you who may be challenging for your seat in the next election should this come through. Worse yet, it appears that you're working to further gerrymander this city, creating the likelihood of a single party voting system in the city, which is bad for everyone. Polls show that likely voters in Charlotte overwhelmingly oppose the extension of terms. You are choosing to ignore that polling and the recommendations of your own advisory committee. I ask you, why create your own advisory committee if you're just going to ignore their recommendations? This appears to be the first part of a trend towards the long-term goal of making city council jobs a permanent full-time position with another increase in pay, with retirement benefits and additional benefits as well, all at the taxpayer's expense. Please close this matter down or put it up to a referendum and let the people of Charlotte decide. Let the people vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much for speaking today. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing? May I
So
read?
moved.
Before we do this, I want to make sure that the public knows that we were conducting this public hearing on City Council's adopted resolution of intent to consider changing the form of government by amending the city charter by ordinance to increase the terms of the office of mayor and city council members from 2 years to 4 years, stagger the election terms, add an additional district member, and adopt an ordinance amending the city charter by ordinance to be effective upon the approval of the vote of the people. So as you've heard the speakers and we have no further speakers, do I have a motion to close the public hearing on the proposed charter amendments?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
All right, Mr. Mitchell and Ms. Molina.
So, City Attorney, if you may, part of the write-up on agenda item number 9 is a little confusing with all the dates, 2025, 2027, 2029. So can you bring some clarity for the council members, sir?
Certainly, Councilmember Mitchell, and I apologize for any confusion in that. Should the voters elect to have staggered 4-year terms, how the stagger would work is that at your election in 2025, a group of you would be up for 2-year terms, and that hasn't been decided by the council yet. And then whoever wasn't up for the 2-year terms would be up for 4-year terms in 2025. The group that has 2-year terms in 2025 runs again in 2027. And that's where the confusion is that I put out there that the stagger would be complete in 2029, but it's not a 4-year. We don't start it. It's actually in 2029, then everybody would be on 4-year terms.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Molina?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I actually, when we initially had the conversation around this, I voted to not support it, and it was because of a few reasons, and I want to make sure that I'm clear, and I stand in the same way. Running every 2 years can be a stressor for anybody in the seat. Having been here a little under 6 months, I know it takes time to get your feet under you and understand the processes for city governance and for policymaking. And so 4 years on its own by itself, I could absolutely support. But where I'm completely divergent in being able to arrive at a yes for me personally is, we're still voting on odd number years, which means that our turnout is going to be low. And if we were to consider even putting this on even number years, it would give us a higher turnout and a higher probability of having our constituents speak. Right now, we have dismal turnout for odd number years. And I don't think that to take that opportunity with such small turnout and such a small representation of the districts in particular, to put a person in a leadership role for 4 years with such a small percentage of the population speaking, I don't feel like would be a fair chance for the public to speak if this were something that were to actually pass. In addition to that, I don't know, and I don't feel strongly that we need another representative in a district seat and 4 members at large. I feel like our at-large members, although they are absolutely, important to what we do, they don't really have the concentrated efforts around the district. So to say that we are going to put a human in a district and we're still going to have 4 at-large members, I don't really know how that would play out in dividing up, speaking personally as a district representative. If I were to say anything about this job, especially as a district representative, there's, for most of us, at least 125,000 community members per district representative that we are responsible for replying to if there's an issue. And so right now, full transparency, we don't have a full-time staff member to help us do that. A lot of us send our own personal emails. A lot of us, we hold 2 or 3 cell phones, and we're sending you emails from our cell phones at 11 and 12 o'clock at night. And some of us are, have full-time jobs and have families and all of that. So if there's anything, I feel like the role itself to be taken seriously, it needs to be an office. As we've grown as a city and now we're nearly a 1 million person city, I think we have to take that part of the representation more seriously, and that, we have dedicated, humans that are there to help us do the job and to serve our residents well. So I'm still a no personally for this in its current form, because there are quite a few things that I feel like I would change. I know that we have to, and we have to have a conversation with our, state legislators to consider term limits, but I feel like that although I can't say for this body it would happen, we don't know what would happen in the future, and I feel like if we're going to have the discussion, then we have to have it from a full scope perspective. And what that would mean is understanding that some humans will come to this position and they won't leave. They won't have a contingency plan where they will look at new humans who could take their place. They'll stay there in perpetuity, and they'll hold the weight of the incumbency without having new leadership to come behind them. And so without taking the responsibility of having term limits as a conversation as well, I don't feel like we're doing justice to this conversation. Is it overdue? Yes. Policy moves slow, and so in 2 years, sometimes you'll start something and you don't get to see it through because it takes a while. So 4 years by itself, I understand the conversation, but there's so many other pieces of the conversation that are missing, and that's why I won't be supporting it.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? So this was our first public hearing. Mr. Baker, what's the next step in the process?
So the next step will be that on May the 8th, the council, this will be back in front of council, and you'll make a decision as to what, if anything, to do in terms of amending an ordinance or adding an ordinance to change the form of government. Again, what we have in front of you is that if you're going to go forward with a change of government, it would be for a voter referendum. That's what would be in front of you, and that's what you'll be deciding on May the 8th.
All right, May the 8th. That's the next time we'll see it on our agenda.
And just to be clear, again, for tonight's purposes, and Ms. Molina, you may have to repeat everything that you just said on the 8th, but right now you're really just closing the hearing. Okay. But yeah, that's kind of where we are at this stage, because no decisions are going to be made tonight.
With that being said, is there any ability to will we have to send this back to committee to change any of the verbiage, or will we have the ability to add or subtract to how it actually goes to a referendum?
So if you were going to do something different than what was advertised tonight, you'd have to start all over. Not with a citizen committee, but what's going to be in front of what was at the public hearing was what was on the page here. So if council's going to do something different, you would have to start the process and hold another public hearing over whatever it is that you were going to do different if you decide to change it. If you decide not to do it, then it's over. But if you're going to make any changes to what's in front of you, then you'd have to start the process over again.
Thank you for the clarification. Thank you for the questions so that we're clear on our next steps. All right, the next, yes, I'm sorry, I know, but Ms. Mayfield wanted, oh, I'm sorry, I thought.
You just got to vote.
All right, I thought Ms. Mayfield, is there someone on the side, Mr.?
No, we've got a motion.
Oh, no, we have a motion.
No, I would raise my hand to speak, colleagues, and then I let the mayor know. Never mind.
Okay.
Let's go to vote.
All right, so all in favor of closing the public hearing, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed to closing the public hearing? All right, thank you very much. Now, the next item that we have on the agenda is a public hearing on the decision on Garrison Road Industry Phase 1 voluntary annexation. We're now going to open the public hearing, and we do have a speaker, Massey Flippin. And so this public hearing is for the voluntary annexation of Garrison Road Industrial Phase 1 area. All right, so, Mr. Flippin?
Yes,
You have
good
3
evening.
minutes.
My name is Massey Flippin, and I'm the managing director and partner for McCraney Property Company, and I'm simply here to address any questions that you may have about this voluntary annexation. It's roughly 150 acres, and happy to take any questions you have. It's been a long journey, and we're excited to be here tonight.
Well, let's find out if we have any questions. Are there any questions or any comments from the council members? Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Actually, it's a question for staff. What I'm wondering is, have we checked in with our fire department, since we did get a report that we're seeing a slight increase in response time? Have we checked with fire to see if we were to add in this additional location, if that will impact their response time?
I think there's a staff person coming to address that question now.
Right.
Hi, Holly Kramer with the Planning Department. So the Charlotte Fire Department did sign off on this annexation. They gave the okay. We're building a new fire station as part of the River District development.
Thank you very much. Thank you,
All right.
Mayor. Move to close the hearing.
Any questions? We have a motion to close and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion. All in favor of closing the public hearing, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? No one. That's unanimous.
Move to adopt the annexation ordinance with an effective date of March 13th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the second item B. Any discussion on that item? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of adoption of the annexation ordinance with the effective date of March 13th, please raise your hands. Anyone opposed? All right. Our next item is item number 11. It is a public hearing for the River District Preserve East Area Voluntary Annexation. Do we have any speakers, Madam Mayor?
No.
We have no speakers. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion
Yes,
to
Madam
close the
Clerk.
public
Go ahead.
hearing.
Motion.
Thank you. Do we have, and then does that motion include approve the River District?
Approve.
We have a motion to adopt and approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Raise your hands as well, so we can do this with the camera. So with that, before we begin our business item, would you like to do social district?
Yes.
Now?
Yes.
All right, let's hear from our Debbie Smith, our Transportation Director, on social districts. This was something that we had planned to do earlier in our meeting, but it didn't quite make it. So Smith is going to do this in our session now. We begin our business meeting.
Great. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Once again, for the record, Debbie Smith, Department of Transportation. I'm very pleased to be with you today to provide a brief update on social districts. Next slide, please. Social districts are areas where people can walk around with open containers of alcoholic beverages. Beverages may be purchased from the permitted bar, restaurant, or other establishment, but must be consumed within the boundary within the hours of the social district. And in August 2022, Charlotte City Council adopted the framework ordinance to allow the creation of social districts. Next slide, please. Within that, within that framework, Charlotte City Council did a couple of things. First, it modified the provisions of Section 15-3 to allow that open container within the social district. Next, it added an article for social districts establishment, and it had very specific legal requirements that are necessary. On the city side, this council must adopt an ordinance designating that social district. The city must publish a council-approved maintenance and management plan on their website. And lastly, the city must register the social district with the NC Alcoholic Beverage Commission. The district, though, has requirements as well. And so within that, the district must erect signage that identifies the district boundaries, hours of operation, and days of the week. And then they must establish that uniform signage for businesses that choose to participate in the social districts. They must create the maintenance and management plan, and then they must develop uniform containers that meet those state requirements. Within those state requirements, it must clearly identify where that permittee, where that beverage was purchased. It must have a district logo, and it must include the information drink responsibly B21. That container cannot be glass, and the maximum of 16 fluid ounces. Now, one other thing I'll note about the businesses within the district, they must opt in or opt out. Not every business has to allow an open container on their premise. Next slide, please. What city staff have been working on is the standards and provision component of the framework ordinance. And really, for Charlotte, social districts really are different. And the reason is that in other locations, their central business district or concentrated area had one area. For Charlotte, that's different. We have a lot of interested areas. And so what we're finding is that through that standard and provisions document, we have requirements on community engagement, what that maintenance and management plan needs to incorporate, specifics around the application process, as well as a formal comment period that would come to City Council. Next slide, please. And I'll end with next steps. And so here we are in March, and we are receiving final applications. We've got a couple of very interested groups that are coming forward. And the earliest that we would then be before you with a public comment period would be that first meeting in April. And that is contingent on the final applications being submitted and vetted by city staff. And then after that, City Council at a next meeting would then have the opportunity to vote on that social district. So with that, last slide, and I'm happy to take questions.
All right, we'll have Mr. Bakari, followed by Ms. Watlington, by Ms. Johnson.
Thank you for the update. Are you able to tell us who, if anyone, has already submitted applications at this point or indications of applications?
Sure, absolutely. Great question, Mr. Bakari. So, so far we have Plaza Midwood Merchants Association. They have submitted their pre-application. We also have Glide Brewery. They have submitted their pre-application. So we anticipate those are the first out of the gate.
Okay, so that's good to know. I would hope a couple things, and I know we're a little larger. It's been a little more complex for us other than others. Usually people in most parts of North Carolina have had this opportunity, just pick one, and we have to kind of lay the framework by which then others apply, which I think is also a good thing for us because the community's asking us to do it, not us asking them. However, it has been a little frustrating for some of us that lack patience. So here we are. I would just ask that we stick to this schedule that you've laid out, as well as if there's any other parts of town, and make sure that don't know about this, the awareness and the communications are strong so they understand, because we're entering the season whereby some of the small businesses who've struggled for so many years now can really benefit from this opportunity if the controls are structured properly. And I know I've been around the state, I've seen it in the wild already, so we know it can work. It's just one of those things that we're anxious to see get going.
Thank you, Mr. Bakari. Appreciate your comments.
Ms. Watlington?
Thank you. Hi, Debbie. How you doing?
Hi. Great.
I've got a question that's really a follow-up of a conversation that's been ongoing. A lot of the areas that may eventually make application to become a social district are also areas that are walkable, the areas like South End, you mentioned Plaza Midwood, and others. One of the things that I know is an ongoing issue that has come up just as recently as this week is that residents in these parts of town where there are high concentrations of pedestrians are begging for changes to our minimum thresholds for the traffic calming policy. I know that a year or two ago we made some adjustments to that, and now we've got an influx of petitions. However, specific to areas like this where we are trying to build very walkable areas, I do believe and agree with our residents that we need to take a look at what those parameters need to be in those areas specifically, particularly if we're going to be talking about a social district where people are walking around consuming alcohol outside. We know that we've got intersections that people are blowing straight through, and we've got a higher density of folks there in our entertainment districts as well. And so I just want to lift that up, and for me, that's something that's going to be extremely important that as we talk about precautions and measures being in place, that we've addressed that specifically ahead of gaining my support for social districts.
Got it. Thank you for that comment. Appreciate that, Ms. Watlington. And I certainly appreciate all of the work that council did to be able to remove some of those barriers and thresholds for the neighborhood traffic calming policy. There's now no longer a requirement to do a petition process, but instead a request. And so great changes that we've made. Appreciate that.
All right. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Debbie, or thank you, Ms. Smith. I wanted to know, is there a website or is this information available online for any businesses that might be interested in still applying?
Absolutely, it is available on the website, and be happy to share that information with you. I don't have that website address immediately available, but we would happily get that for you. But it is available, and the application process is online today.
And when is the application deadline?
No application deadline. It's a standing open application. So prior to us going live with the application, what we were encouraging folks to do was email the Charlotte social districts, and we would set up an immediate phone call conversation with them to learn more. But the applications are ongoing anytime.
Okay, so then in the slide where it says receive final applications, that's just for the first?
Correct, the first batch, yes,
Okay.
absolutely, yeah.
Okay, and then if we could just share that website information on our social media pages? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, are there any other comments regarding social districts? If not, Mr. Jones, what's next?
Thank you, Mayor and members of council, and thank you for allowing Debbie to make this presentation during the manager's report. There is one report that we wanted to provide you tonight, and if Phil Rieger would come up, I think Phil is going to spearhead it. And maybe a little bit over a year ago, we were struggling, is probably the best way to gauge it, with city-owned properties, and how do we make sure that we have a process. So I guess it was last summer, maybe last fall, we pulled together a team across all departments, and there are a number of parcels that we're getting some interest in. So I just wanted to give you a quick update tonight on the process that's in place now that we didn't have beforehand, and some of the opportunities that will be coming. So thank you, Phil.
As the presentation's coming up, let me just sort of introduce the topic. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Just for the record, Phil Rieger, General Services Director. And it's a pleasure today to update you on the staff's work to strategically manage our real estate assets, particularly to achieve our city goals. So what I want to do is just provide also a forward look at some initiatives that will require City Council's input and action in the future. These are just examples. It's not an exhaustive list, but it'll give you a sense of the work that we're doing today. I don't stand alone in this. This is a major collaborative effort amongst many city staff. And so if I could go to the next slide, we'll just get started. Just want to provide a few basic data points to y'all. We own about 1,000 or a little over 1,000 parcels that equate to about 5,125 acres, plus or minus. Most of these properties are there to conduct city operations. And so you can see the pictures on the slide. There are fire stations, police stations, maintenance facilities, water sewer plants, community spaces, and office buildings. Next slide, please. Historically, real estate for the city existed to support capital projects. And as a result, we have a team of real estate experts that acquire, they appraise, they lease and license real estate for the city. All of these activities, of course, are governed by state law, local ordinances, city policies, and best practices. Next slide, please. Prior to 2017, in conducting our business, our focus that was driven by council policy was to maximize revenue. And so in 2017, council adopted a new policy to shift that emphasis away from revenue generation solely and to place priority on achieving city priorities. We call this portfolio management. Since those actions, since that time, actions like the affordable housing framework, economic development initiatives like corridors of opportunity have been redefining how we think about real estate work. Next slide, please. So this shift to portfolio management methodology has added a strategic component to our work. Where we once were very tactical in our efforts around capital projects, we've added a strategic element as we look to use city real estate assets to support community initiatives. Next slide, please. And so practically speaking, we've done this by creating a new team. And this team we've called the Real Estate Collaborative. And this team has been established to ensure that we're thinking strategically, thinking holistically about how we use our property. It's an interdisciplinary team. It's assembled to look at the real estate opportunities that we have in front of us comprehensively. And I've listed the expertise that we have on the team. It really represents most all departments in the city. The team has been really charged to really take an initial review of any unsolicited proposals that we may receive from parties interested in city property. But to get started, the current assignment on the team's docket is to do an inventory and assessment of the properties that we have. So we're looking at all 1,000+ properties that we have. And we're developing a tool for the team to use as it thinks strategically about our properties, but also for policymakers and leadership to use as it's making decisions about how to use our property. You'll see there that team plans to complete that first assignment this summer. It's a big lift. Looking at 1,000 properties is no small task. And so if I could go to the next slide. So I'm going to transition and look at some examples of some initiatives that are likely to need city council action in the near future. Again, these are not an exhaustive list. It's just an example of things that are coming. And I offer this list. It's not intended to be a long discussion about necessarily any one of these properties tonight, but just to give you a sense of what's coming. Next slide, please. So from an affordable housing perspective, many of you will remember the 2021 RFP proposals that that we came in, and that was an initial effort, again, for staff to collaborate, look at the city properties that we have, identify properties that might be good candidates for affordable housing developments, put those out in an RFP, and see what kind of responses we would get from developers. We got 4 responses, and those properties will need city council action this spring to summer. You can see some other examples here on the list for affordable housing that either will need real estate action or council action in the coming months. If I could go to the next slide, please. So 2501 Archdale Drive is a 6-acre property, and it's that little hockey stick that is there in the picture. And this property was one of the properties in the 2021 Affordable Housing RFP, but the developers gave us feedback and said, this property really isn't a good option. It specifically wasn't a good option because the topography is really steep, and this is a landlocked property, and access just turned out to be a real challenge. Since that time, we've gotten an unsolicited proposal from a group to build mountain bike trails, not unlike other mountain bike trails around the city of Charlotte. And we have partnered with Mecklenburg County in the past to do this type of work using city property, at least from a temporary perspective, to be recreation space, open space for folks. And so City Council will likely see an action item in the near future to do a land lease with Mecklenburg County to facilitate building mountain bike trails here until something happens in this area where this particular property, maybe through assemblage, might become something different. Next slide, please. So 101 South Tryon Street, otherwise known as Polk Park, is also on your agenda tonight later. But Polk Park, originally dedicated in 1992, was actually a project that was budgeted for in the FY 2020 budget. We allocated $1 million to take a look at the redevelopment of this site. And this site, being commissioned in 1992, is grown tired. The fountain, which there's a picture of, is not operable anymore, and quite frankly, cost prohibitive to fix. The landscaping on this site has sort of outgrown the park, so it needs some work, and because of that, because of the height of the trees, lighting is not as good as it once was. And so we've got an opportunity in front of us to consider a public-private partnership, and of course that's on the agenda for later tonight. Next slide, please. So we also do leasing. Sometimes there are opportunities to lease city space. It's usually a temporary sort of condition. The Belmont Center has some newly vacated space in its basement. It was vacated as a result of the consolidation of city staff back into the government center. The work we did during the COVID time period allowed us the opportunity to do that. And Representative Jeff Jackson has approached us needing a local office, and we have an opportunity to lease a small space in the basement of the Belmont Center. It's a market rate lease, and that is also on tonight's agenda for City Council action. Next slide, please. So 1222 Statesville Avenue is a 10-acre site. This is the site where the fire administration building is located. That's at the bottom point of the triangle there. There is actually about 5 or 6 acres behind it. You can see it there. That looks like a concrete foundation of an old building. That site was the site of what was once going to be the Joint Communications Center. It's currently used as storage, and there's an opportunity being evaluated. It's a proposed lease for an emerging industry that would create jobs in the community. And so that is something that our collaborative is looking at and weighing right now, and something that City Council will likely weigh on in the near future. Next slide, please. And then the final property that just wanted to bring forward is West Boulevard. This is 7/10 of an acre, recently acquired. This is in a corridor of opportunity. It was purchased last year. This was a property that was going to be federally seized, and we purchased it instead to achieve corridors of opportunity goals. In this particular property has potential for a lease to renovate the property to potentially provide community services. And so those are, again, just some examples of some properties and some types of uses that we're thinking strategically about, that the Real Estate Collaborative are working on. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the manager and be available to answer any questions you might have.
So
Mr.
thank you.
Jones, before we open it up for questions.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. So I guess it's two things. One is, as I mentioned, right about this time last year, we had a bunch of discussions about city-owned property and things of that nature, and it was very important for us to stop looking or working in silos, but to have really something that's more of a horizontal organization. And so you see that in corridors of opportunity, you see that in the violence framework earlier tonight, but also you see it here. And again, it isn't that we want to go through all of these projects tonight. There was just so much coming in that I asked the team to pull this together so at a bare minimum, you know that, one, the collaborative is together, and we're making sure that we take this through all of our departments as opposed to one department, and two, that we are gaining some interest in some of these parcels. And I think the best example is the one that, because of topography, we weren't able to do affordable housing, but there is a potential use there. But so that's what tonight's about, just to let you know that we're working on these, and some of these potentially could come before you.
All right. Mr. Bakari, followed by Ms. Watlington and Mr. Graham.
Yeah, no, this is a great presentation, and to be honest, long overdue. Well done in rolling this out. I think, seeing something like that batched up is something we have not seen as a council for the time that I've been on this body, and seeing a process that you've put in place, I think makes a lot of sense. We sat 5 years ago or so and talked about the importance of not being vertical, but being horizontal in the organization, and how the outcomes are going to be so much better. And this is another great example. So I'll say one thing, though. One of the challenges in an organization this size is that things can get very bureaucratic if they are horizontal in nature. So you've done all the right things to set this up. I would really encourage figuring out how you can be nimble, how you can move quickly through the processes. I mean, the punchline is we have over 1,000 properties. That is wild. We could barely do it when it was the old pre-2018 model of just maximize the value. Acting like a portfolio manager is not within our DNA. We're getting better at it, but it's not there. So the tendency is going to be to move ridiculously slow. And so I think you guys need to figure out the process by which everyone's engaged. And I think it's going to be a lot of, elements of risk mitigation, which I think, again, is trust the council. You don't need to vet everything out and have your position locked in. In fact, sometimes we like it when you have pros and cons and we get to weigh in. And that will enable you to not be waiting for everything to be completely baked. You can bring things opportunistically to us. You can do the initial evaluation as you're finishing your overall framework, and we can move fast because these opportunities move fast. So I think it's a huge step in the right direction, and if we can just finish that to the next level, we'll be in really good shape.
That's a great example of what we did at the retreat, bringing it to the council early and trying to figure out what's the best way to do it. I think that's a great comment. So,
as long as we all also recognize the fact that they're doing that. And
right,
we're, you know what I mean? That's the most important part,
no,
right?
the important part is the conversation.
Yeah.
Right at the beginning. All right. Next, we have Ms. Watlington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to comment, I'm glad to see this starting to move as well. I do think I'm very pleased to see that the Corridors of Opportunity Group is a part of this working collaborative, because I think it's going to be incredibly important, particularly for these lots that are located in corridors of opportunity, that what ends up there is a reflection of the highest and best use as per the community's wishes, whether that's in a playbook or in some kind of area planning process. That said, the one on West Boulevard, certainly am aware that there have been some conversations and there are some opportunity there. I personally would like to see a little bit more of an RFP done just because of where that one is in particular. So we can talk a little bit more about that one, but I want to just make sure, because it is a catalyst intersection there on that corridor, that we make sure that we've searched far and wide and given folks an opportunity to really bring their best to us.
Another great comment. Now we'll hear from Mr. Graham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too want to lend my voice to support in terms of the direction that we're going with this. I think it's really good work. And my question is not really specific to that, but within the same zip code. In reference to the council asked the staff and the manager, I guess a year and a half ago, in reference to identifying city-owned land for affordable housing, specifically along future core transit lines. And so it would be nice to kind of get a report like that sooner than later, because I think that's a tremendous opportunity, and us looking inward in terms of what we're doing. So if we can get something similar to that, it's been a while. And as we move forward with the Housing Trust Fund discussions and other housing initiatives, I think that's really important to kind of see what's our inventory and what we can do.
All right. Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Rieger, two things. One, somewhat echoing my colleagues, when we look at the affordable housing piece, I hope that it's already planned to have conversations with council members prior to us receiving the information for a vote. I am definitely intrigued regarding Bullet 2, Columbus Circle, and Ambassador Street. When I, with my former colleagues on council and the city manager, when we created the TLC by CLT program, it started in the historic Camp Green neighborhood, which used to be Regal Heights, which is now also Bryant Park. Our investment helped to trigger a lot of development in that area. That development has caused some displacement, a lot of opportunities, so it will be very important to me to know who is that partner that's coming in, because these lots that the city owns, we have had under on our books for quite some time, and I want to make sure that we're moving in a direction that's actually going to respect the ideas and the goals of the TLC by CLT program. Also, for the 1222 Statesville Avenue, the 10 acres, when you noted on slide 11, we have it noted in there that it is a market rate lease for the Belmont property, but yet for the Statesville Avenue location, where we're saying there's an opportunity for a proposed lease, it will be also beneficial prior to a discussion, knowing if that is also a market rate lease or how close, because I will, for full transparency, say I'm not interested in seeing any dollar leases coming before us, because we do need to make sure that we are creating and generating revenue to offset the costs so that we don't have to tax our residents. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? So with that, Mr. Jones, anything else? All right, you've got the 30-day memo and everything else is good. We'll now go into our policy meeting, which is to item number 13, to amend the City Council's resolution on boards and commissions. I've asked the city attorney to read the resolution since it has been modified, since it came out with the agenda earlier last week.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. And this is in response to Councilmember Mayfield's request to specifically add in that reports would be presented, could be requested also by the committees, not just council. And as you'll see in new subsection 7 of the attachment, there is a specific section relating to reports of boards and committees and commissions. And to basically get that particular request in with the language that's there, the last sentence of section 7 could read, in addition to required written reports, the city council or a city council committee may request on a case-by-case basis that an oral report be made to the council or requesting council committee. So that little bit of language there, just inserted there, I believe will get to where Ms. Mayfield was requesting.
Is there a motion to adopt the revised resolution as stated by the city attorney on boards and commissions to establish remote participation policy for members of certain boards, committees, and commissions of the Charlotte, as well as reporting to various committees from commissions, boards, and committees? So do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Is there also item B? We'll take these in joint if that's okay. To adopt a revised resolution amending the Code of Ethics, gift policy, and disclosure requirements for all members of all boards, committees, and commissions of the city of Charlotte.
Move to approve A and B, Mayor.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. I don't see any opposition. Now we move to our business agenda, and the first item on our business agenda is item 14, Polk Park Partnership Framework. For item 14, is there a motion to approve the Polk Park Partnership Framework to support a group of civic leaders who will partner with Charlotte City Partners to lead fundraising, design, construction, and renaming of Polk Park located at the corner of Trade and Tryon Street?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. With that, any discussion? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. Mr. Rieger kind of pointed out his previous presentation several years ago, even prior to the conversation that we had last year. The city started looking at ways of repurposing or better utilizing city-owned property. Polk Park sits at the southwest corner of Trade and Tryon, and it's actually named after Thomas Polk, not President Polk. And currently, I believe it fits the definition of an underutilized parcel. Mr. Rieger gave a bit of color to that, but not only does the city not have a parks department to upkeep a park in the way it's supposed to be done, it has a water element that doesn't work. It has poor lighting. There are limited areas to congregate, and a persistent pest problem exists, particularly large rats. In 2019, during my first term on City Council, Council approved $1 million to enter into a public-private partnership with the Republican National Convention Host Committee to redesign the park, which was intended to be left behind as a legacy project from the convention. We spent $650,000 of that money on a design, but when changes to the convention happened, that project went away. But after the project went away, the city was approached by a group of private citizens who proposed redesigning the park, leaving the ownership of the land in city hands while maintaining and programming the space with private funds and naming the park after Hugh McCall. These conversations started last term, and they continued into this term with the new council. I spoke with all of my colleagues on council in January about moving forward, and there was near unanimous desire to get refamiliarized with the details of the public-private partnership. So I worked with staff and provided all of council with that memo, kind of outlining all the details last week. The feedback that I heard, other feedback that I heard from council was compassionate responses to our unhoused neighbors who frequent the area, public engagement, and the inclusion of recognition of historic communities in the design of the park. Speaking with the stakeholders, these requests don't seem hard to meet or impossible to include. Many, if not all, of the stakeholders are currently engaged in the ongoing work with our unhoused neighbors, and public engagement will be integral to the design process. Trade in Tryon has been the epicenter of our community, going back to its importance as an indigenous crossroads for commerce in the greater Appalachian region for indigenous populations, all the way up to being the center of town for colonial settlements, and fast forward as the square, which was where the transit and transportation hub existed for much of modern, 20th century into 21st century Charlotte. There are certain statutory obligations that we have to meet should this move forward, while ours and the public's feedback will further influence the design of this park. Approval of this public-private partnership tonight will allow the manager to utilize the remainder of the $350,000 that was budgeted in 2019 to demolish this underutilized property and to enter into a public-private partnership to create a vibrant public space. And with that, I look forward to approving this in a few minutes.
All right, Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I have a multiple level of concerns. One, on Thursday, all of council received, in preparation of today's meeting, a brief update. And in that update is where I learned of the $350,000 proposal for demolition of this space. Now, for full transparency, I have had multiple meetings and conversations regarding this space, and I'm quite sure in those meetings I have asked as is, because one, I am not a fan of naming anything after an individual who is still alive. One, because all across the nation we have had to spend thousands of dollars, and in this city, to rename not only streets and to remove buildings and to do all these other things. With the original conversation that I have had with multiple individuals, some of those individuals in this room, including a conversation with our city manager, there was no time where there was a discussion of there being a financial expectation, a ask, or a recommendation of tax dollars. Now, we go back to 2019, where it is stated and has been shared that a conversation regarding the RNC, that $1 million of capital funding was going to be allocated as we move forward. That was a separate conversation that during the RNC, there was a plan to utilize that space at that time. Unfortunately, that is an event that did not transpire. Moving forward, this feels like, okay, well, we allocated $1 million, so we're just going to go ahead and throw the other $350,000 towards it to help clean it up. One, I'm quite sure there's some other things that we have some capital needs for that $350,000 could be allocated to. More importantly, out of the more than 4 conversations that I had with different individuals in the community, none of those conversations consisted of, oh, by the way, we're probably going to need, or city is in conversation with us, that $350,000 will help to clear this particular location for us to move forward. Again, if we're using city tax dollars, I am not comfortable with moving forward to name anything after a living individual. I was perfectly okay with us moving forward when it was an as-is conversation of, we are going to transfer this space over because an entity has gone out, identified private funding, identified private support, and they will then move forward with maintaining this space. And in that process, they were wanting to name this space after someone in our community who they wanted to recognize who has done a number of great things. My one request during those conversations is I need there to be some plaque, some recognition of the Native people who are also part of the commerce and the beginning of commerce of trade and Tryon, where this location is at. That was my only request. That request was not in regards to an expectation of $350,000 of tax dollars being spent to level this particular location. Had we had any conversation regarding any amount of city tax dollars, then I would have been able to ask whatever questions and further clarification at that time of either the individuals that I spoke with, of which also I did reach out to individuals earlier today to share my concerns, as well as shared my concerns with staff, which is why it is listed. And clarifying that, again, because $1 million was allocated to do a study to see if we were able to move forward. According to my understanding, as of today, that understanding is when that report came back, it was cost prohibitive for us to move forward. To me, that doesn't mean, well, we do have a group that has an interest. They have gone out and done their own fundraising. They have identified support to move forward this conversation. But since we have $350,000 sitting over here, then we should just go ahead and use that to add to doing the demolition of the location. It would be very different if at any point of the conversations over the last 2 to 3 months that I had there been any conversation regarding funding by the city. But if I was under the impression of a as-is and you want to move forward with this, that is a very different conversation than the conversation of today, this coming before us to vote on, and there being an expectation of saying, well, in 2019, when I was here, and I'm quite sure I'm on record as a no vote, because I was a no vote for the fact of that event coming and being in the city prior to all of that. But now we fast forward a number of years, we're at a very different conversation. It does not feel transparent to me that after the multiple conversations, a dollar amount was not discussed, much less an expectation that because $1 million was allocated, we should just go ahead and spend the $350 that we have set aside that was for one particular thing that didn't move forward, then we should just go ahead and put that in for this conversation in order to rename a facility after an individual. Although you have done good things in the community for a lot of people, I personally have a concern of us naming anything after a living person for the simple fact there are so many people in the community that could be recognized for their amazing work. A number of those people have passed on, and it's in respect of their history and their work. But again, for me, since there was no ask of any financial, it was strictly a as-is, you will take over it, I wasn't going to push that particular issue. If we're now talking about utilizing tax dollars because we allocated it in the capital fund, I really feel like there are other capital needs that we have right now that $350,000 could address. So as it stands right now, with this ask in it, I will not be supporting this.
Thank you, Ms. Mayfield. Mr. Driggs?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank those distinguished citizens who have come here tonight for this conversation, for your patience waiting this long until this topic came up. This whole proposition does have years of history. I remember going with Ms. Eisel, Mayor Pro Tem, over to an office overlooking the site, talking about it. And I also remember discussion of the funding at the time. It doesn't come as a shock to me that we're talking about $350,000 now. I think that is excellent value for the vitalization that would take place at this location. This has been a neglected little corner for a long time, and it's really about time we did something about it. So I'm very pleased that we are doing something about it. And again, I think for $350,000, boy, you know, what do you get for that much these days? The other thing I would mention is naming after a living individual. I think it's a good thing if we are able to acknowledge Mr. McCall while he's alive. so that he knows that we're doing it. And he and I don't belong to the same political party, but it doesn't matter. As a longtime member of the financial services community, I experienced from New York and other locations the growth of North Carolina National Bank, Nations Bank, on. And the driving force was Hugh McCall. And the benefit to the city of that effort of his is immense. And he has served in other capacities, was a member of a group of people who were an informal sort of council that did tremendous things for Uptown and for our city. So I don't think it's at all inappropriate that he be recognized this way, and I certainly intend to support this. Thank you.
Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I, too, want to lend my voice in support of the Polk Park Partnership Framework and honoring Hugh McCall and thanking those who stand before us. And again, I think Ed said it correctly. I believe that you should give people flowers when they can smell it and see it. The 525 building, the Transamerica building, the corporate center, the Gateway Center, Uptown is Uptown because of Mr. McCall. And fortunately, I had the opportunity to work with him and others, identify minority contractors for all those particular projects. So he literally built Uptown Charlotte, and this is just a small recognition to acknowledge that, and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to clarify the ownership. Will the city maintain the ownership of the land?
Mr. Rieger?
Bill Rieger, General Services. Yes, ma'am, the city will maintain and retain ownership.
So we'll maintain the ownership, but the maintenance will be, who will maintain the property? Will
The city will maintain the property after it's redeveloped.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, any other comments? All right, we have a motion on the floor to approve the Polk Park Partnership Framework to support a group of civic leaders who will partner with Center City Partners to lead the fundraising, design, construction, and renaming of Polk Park. Just personally, if I could, I went to Queens College. It was a women's college, and there was a time that college was about to close. And we talk about how a neighborhood could change. There were actual opportunities for redevelopment, just housing and housing and housing. And Hugh McCall decided that wasn't going to happen. And today we have a thriving private school that has given so much back in terms of people and talent that I have to say that the reach of what Hugh McCall has done is beyond Center City. We don't have any idea what he has done privately without any announcement. He and his wife Jane have been always people that stepped up and supported. And for my university, or the school that I went to, it was something that made a true difference, that we have that campus the way we have it today, that we have kids that can go to school there and be very successful by getting jobs in Charlotte, because a lot of them come out and end up working at Bank of America, end up doing all kinds of things, studies, internships that are a result of Mr. McCall's largesse and commitment to this community. So with that, we have a motion on the floor. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. All right, Madam Clerk, do you have it? All opposed? All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right, the next item on our agenda is item 15, to accept the additional opioid litigation settlement funding. Is there a motion to adopt a resolution?
Second.
And authorize the manager to do the documents, okay?
Yeah, go for
We have a
it.
motion and a second. Can we add 16 into this because it's directly related for the settlement funds?
Sure.
She knows we've got this closed session to go into, so let's
Should
do
they not be
this.
separate since they are listed in the book as separate?
I was thinking that I would read, make A, B, and C, D, E, and F. But that's, Ms. Mayfield, would you rather it be two separate?
Yes, ma'am,
All right,
because
we
we
will
have
have
it in
two
the system
separate
as
ones.
two items.
For items 15, is there a motion?
Yeah,
We have a second on it. All, and any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hands. Anyone opposed? Next item is 16. For item 16, is there a motion to adopt a budget ordinance?
To adopt.
We have a motion and a second, including A, B, and
A, B,
C.
and C.
Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor, please raise your hands. Anyone opposed? All right. Item 17, is there a motion to adopt a resolution to designate the Queen City as, I want to go bzzz, B-City USA affiliate to demonstrate the city's support for sustaining native bees and other pollinators in a healthy local ecosystem?
Motion to
All
adopt.
in
Do I have a
favor,
motion?
Buzz?
All in favor of the buzz? The Hornet's going to work on this as an idea. I don't think Hornets count, actually. All right, so with that, we have a motion and a second. All right, we have some questions, Ms. Mayfield and Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. So this is actually a question for staff. As we're designating Charlotte to be B-City, it will be helpful to receive an update regarding our UDO and what language are we looking at that's going to support our bee environment. As we know that clear cutting has contributed to mass migration as well as displacement of the bees. So if we're going to move forward to accept this language and to try to be identified as B-City, what in our UDO language or any of our planning language is going to help us to achieve this goal?
Thanks for the question, Councilmember Mayfield. Sean Heath, Housing Director. I had a chance to talk to the team today about that question, and they reminded me of two things in particular. First, the Tree Canopy Action Plan from 2020 was informative to both the comprehensive plan and the UDO. And the UDO itself, of course, includes a number of provisions that are supportive of the council's priorities around the environment, such as commitments to green spaces.
Pay a fee in lieu. That fee in lieu with planting new trees is not going to get us to the same level of protection as we have when we allow a clear cut to happen. So it will be helpful to utilize the language that other bee cities that have been identified are using to protect the current tree canopy versus allowing more often a fee in lieu, because that is not helping with our pollination, which we know is important to our environment. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I had the pleasure of visiting the Woods Community Garden. It's in District 4. I was just over there this weekend. It's my second time going over there, and it's a family, and they're like bee keepers. So I wanted to know, does this initiative offer the opportunity to support local beekeepers or partner with them or do anything to support them? I know that there's a plot of land behind them. It may or may not be city. It's city or county land. I can talk to you about that offline. But how does this initiative assist those that are doing the work already? Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. It's my understanding that most of the emphasis here is really on educational programming. So what are things can be done to demonstrate the importance of pollinators to the community, and what are actions that the community members can take kind of in service to those broader objectives. I don't believe there are any specific funding opportunities, for example, for people to step forward and seek a grant opportunity, for example.
Okay. All right. All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. Anyone opposed? All right, the motion passes. The next item is for item 18, to adopt a resolution to approve a fixed-term lease agreement with Jeffrey Neal Jackson for office space within the Belmont Center. Parcel number identified 081, 101, and 15, and authorize the manager to execute those documents.
Motion to adopt. A and
We have a motion for A, B, and B in a second. Is there any discussion?
Discussion.
No. Any discussion? All in favor? Please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? Thank you. The next item is item 19. Is there a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the donation of one surplus bus system to Lake Wiley Christian Assembly, a nonprofit organization, authorizing the manager to execute all documents to make this action possible?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second for A and B. Is there any discussion? Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question. Were other nonprofits aware that this bus was available?
I do not know the answer. Does anyone on the staff?
Shelter.
Oh,
The shelter, it's a
was
shelter.
available.
Yes. Mr. Cagle?
Good evening again, Mayor and City Council. So to my knowledge, no, this request was received by the department directly from the school. It was not something that we would have advertised. Had this request not been received, CATS would send this surplus, this shelter, to surplus auction.
Okay. Just in the future, though, Brent, can we kind of be a little bit more transparent, so even a request come in, just let it be known to other nonprofits in the area? I just want to make sure that it's a fair and equitable process.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? All right, the next item is the Cherry Park Interlocal Agreement. For item 20, adopt a resolution authorizing the manager to negotiate and execute an interlocal agreement with the county to fund improvements to Cherry Park, adopt a budget ordinance appropriating $250 in private development funds for infrastructure improvements to the General Capital Projects Fund from Southern Real Estate, Inc. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I think that there were two choices in this. It was the park or some transportation, something improvement. So, and the neighborhood chose the park. So is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor, please raise your hands. Anyone opposed? Mr. Mitchell, you're opposed?
Oh, I'm sorry. Hand was tied. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to make sure.
I'm about ready for that pizza.
We're going to get there. The next item, 21, is there adopt a resolution authorizing the manager to negotiate and execute a municipal agreement with NCDOT for construction of water line adjustments and improvements, authorizing the manager to approve the reimbursement request for the actual cost of the construction. Do I have a motion?
To approve.
Do we have a second? I need a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? All right, the next item is a municipal agreement for relocation of water and sanitary infrastructure. Adopt a motion authorizing the manager to negotiate and execute this agreement with NCDOT for construction of water and sanitary sewer lines, relocation adjustments and improvement, and authorize the manager to approve reimbursement requests for the actual cost.
To approve.
We have a motion and a second? And a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hands. Anyone opposed? Thank you. The next item is item 23, a resolution supporting the Ed L. Ned Curran designation for the Interstate 485 Weddington Road interchange. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution supporting Ned Curran's designation of Interstate 485 Weddington Road interchange that would be submitted to the state?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Mr. Driggs.
I just wanted to say briefly, I appreciate this recognition of Ned Curran, who has served our community and the state in so many capacities, a leading businessman, and with a great passion for Charlotte. So I'm glad we're doing this. Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? Here, Ms. Mayfield.
The same comments that I mentioned earlier regarding renaming, supporting anything regarding an individual that is living, and the possibility of moving forward in a decade or so, having to remove such said name.
Well, that would be up to the state, I think, wouldn't it? Is it, once the
That's why I
sign is
don't
admitted,
understand, since it's from NCDOT, I don't
it's
understand.
part of their process. Matthews
For
has
us to
do
even
it.
have to
Yeah.
have our name on record for it, but for on record, as a African-American female, no, I will not be supporting, but it will be for the same reason, and that is concerns moving forward as impact specifically in African-American community and working class communities, what may or may not come out at some point down in the future, I will not be.
All right. Ms. Watlington?
Ms. Mayfield, can you've said something that is,
Why I will not be? Yes, ma'am.
can you expound why specifically as a black female? Do you have something specific that is a concern?
I do that I will not share at this dais yet. What I will say is for consistency's sake, renaming any space, any street, any park, any venue after someone who is living, when we as a nation have gone through multiple venues and spending thousands of dollars to remove names, statues, rename streets, I have a concern that we are setting ourselves up to continue to do the same thing for a future generation, to then look back and go through, just like we have done, to say, who were the people that sat around the table and chose to move forward with this particular decision, and did they actually do all of their research, or did they only do partial research?
I can appreciate that position out of an abundance of caution. Okay.
All right, we have a motion, Mr. Bakari.
I think Ned is an incredible person. I like Ned an awful lot, and he's done so much, but I'm going to just vote no, just out of consistency on this one.
Vote no for what?
Out of consistency for, again, when we have the direct ability to name things, or indirect in that case, just to stay consistent with that point.
The issue wasn't living or dead, the issue was names.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't have to do with living or dead people.
Okay. All right, you have a motion on the floor. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, the motion passes. All opposed?
Almost tempted.
All right, those opposed, 2. All right, 3.
Let's count.
Wait a minute. But all opposed, raise your hand. 3, 4. Okay. I'm not quite sure that I got the count correctly, but
Stephanie, were you able
we
to
had
get
4 people, so I know it's 6-4, but I didn't know who.
Councilmember Winston, Anderson, Driggs, Graham, Johnson, Mitchell, and Molina. In opposition, I have Bakari, Mayfield, and Ms. Watlington.
I think Ms. Johnson
All right.
is not in
Yeah,
favor.
I don't want to, what is that, 7-4? 6.
No, there's only 2 of us.
It's 6-4.
6-3.
If you vote negative, yes or no, just tell us.
It's 7-3.
I'll just keep it. I'm fine, yes.
What?
I'm a yes.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. I think that we have one more. Business appointments for the Bicycle Advisory Committee and the Charlotte Business Inclusion Advisory Committee. Madam Clerk.
Yes, ma'am. For the Bicycle Advisory Committee, Danielle Profit received 7 votes. And for the Charlotte Business Inclusion Advisory Committee, Kamisha Ferris received 10 votes.
So do I have a motion for those appointments? So moved, and in a second, I think I heard a second from Ms. Mayfield and Ms. Anderson. All in favor of those appointments, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? All right. Now, may I have a motion from the city attorney to go into closed session? We'll take about a 5-minute break and reconvene in the room behind the chamber.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, members of council, we'll need to have 2 closed session items, and there are 3 exceptions to the statutory provisions. First is to consult with the city attorney to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the city attorney and the city council pursuant to GS 143-318-11A3. to establish or instruct city staff concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the city in negotiating the price or other material terms of a contract or proposed contract for the acquisition of real property by purchase, option, exchange, or lease pursuant to NCGS 143-318-11A5, and to hold a closed session with City Council to view a recording that has been ordered to be released by Superior Court pursuant to NCGS 143-318-11A10.
All right, do we have a motion and a second? All in favor of going into closed session on the motions as described by read through the city attorney, please raise your hands. Anyone opposed? All right, we will, do I need to adjourn the meeting now so that we can go after?
When we come out of a closed session in CH 14, we will adjourn the meeting. There won't be any votes.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's 5-minute break and get ready to